start off with a microphone, and first order of business is Wyoming DEQ. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Todd Parfit. I'm the Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. I was asked to be here to talk about just DEQ updates. What I thought I'd do is I provided a handout, and I thought I would just do a quick overview of the agency. Some of you are very familiar with the agency, and some maybe not as familiar. So that's where I thought we would start. So as an overview, we have, as an agency, currently 275 full-time employees, and that's for 7 divisions. Those divisions, and I break them up into air quality, water quality, and solid and hazardous waste as one grouping because the oversight agency that we have for primacy programs is EPA. The next 2 divisions are land quality and abandoned mine lands, and those are primacy packages with the Office of Surface Mines under the Department of Interior. And then we have a state unique program, which is the Industrial Siting Division, and then Administration or Management Services is the last division. And I put there after each acronym there, like AQD-80, that means there are 80 full-time employees that are in the air quality division, and so you can follow that across. Administration looks like it's a little heavy, but that's because they do the contracts, they do the fiscal budgets, but they also do NEPA and the Public Information Officer role. The Deputy Director is in that group, as well as the Public Information Officer, if I didn't say that. So they serve a lot of roles in that division. We have 5 office locations. Cheyenne, obviously, is the headquarters office. We have roughly 170 full-time employees in the Cheyenne office. We have Casper, Sheridan, Lander, and Pinedale, and actually our Casper offices are on the first floor of this building. Our primary functions of the agency, obviously permitting, we do a lot of that. And then we have inspection and compliance activities associated with those permits. We do a lot of monitoring, particularly for air and water. And then a lot of corrective action programs or remediation programs. And then lastly, reclamation, and that reclamation is typically around either mining or abandoned mine lands. I did want to mention that recently we've had some changes within the agency, senior leadership changes. Alan Edwards was the Deputy Director. He retired again. He retired from the state 3 times. And this one's going to stick. But when he retired, that opened up the Deputy Director position, which also serves as the ombudsman to help large projects work through the agency and understand the requirements that they might have. Recently, that position has now been filled with Nancy Veer, and she's here. She's the new Deputy Director for the agency. She was the Air Quality Division Administrator. And before that, she worked for the Attorney General's office and was our attorney for air quality matters. We also had a change in land quality. Kyle Wentland is now with the Energy Authority as the Director of Fossil Fuels. His position has been now filled with Brandy O'Brien, and she is here as well. She has been in that position since about January. So those are some of the changes. We're currently in the process of starting to look to fill that air quality administrator position. Until then, Nancy will continue to do air quality, where we've divided amongst the managers within that division some of the responsibilities, but Nancy will be doing 2 roles for a short period of time, which creates the incentive to get it filled quickly. As far as budget goes, we have a biennial operating budget of $203 million. And I pull out the AML. AML represents $104 million of that. And it kind of skews the statistics when I'm looking at how much is the agency funded or run by general funds, how much by federal or by fee. And you get a better picture if you pull the AML dollars out. And so for all the other programs, the budget for the biennium is $99 million. And then just to show you, 54% is general funds, 20% federal, and 25% fees. One thing to note is if you look back just a few years ago, the federal portion was around 25%. So the federal portion has been on a steady decline for the last 15 years. But we've also taken on some other programs, and so as we do that, general funds tend to creep up. So general funds are up a little, federal funds are down a little. One of the other things that we have, that we manage, is bonding for many of our programs. Land quality obviously is the big one. So we hold $3.2 billion in bond instruments. Of that, land quality represents $2.5 billion. We have bonding requirements in industrial siting for wind and solar. We also have bonding requirements for commercial oil well field disposal facilities and water quality. And then for the solid and hazardous waste division, we have some bonding requirements related to landfills and transfer stations. The last thing I'd like to just mention is regarding the budget. We're currently following the federal budget that's been proposed by the administration. We call it the skinny budget. It looks like it would have about a 50% reduction for EPA in their funding. And we're evaluating right now, as other states are, what those impacts would be to Wyoming and what programs would be impacted and what those impacts would be. So it's as that goes through the process, it has a long way to go, but just we want to just make sure we're staying on top of that. The national organizations that we are members of, like the Environmental Council of States, the Interstate Mining Compact Commission, and then some of the media-specific groups are also watching what's happening on the funding side with the federal programs and making comments to Congress and to EPA or OSM. The last thing I'll say on this page here is Lee Zeldin is the new EPA administrator. Things are moving very quickly, which I think is a good thing, but it's just keeping pace with what they're doing. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. And then Cyrus Western, who probably all of you know, is the Region 8 administrator. He's been great to work with. I talk to him frequently, more so than probably a year's worth of conversations just a year ago. So I think that's a real positive aspect of identifying issues that we might have or concerns and getting some responses on a more timely basis. So then I thought it would be good to talk about each of the divisions, particularly the ones where we have permitting and what's happening in each of those divisions. So the first one is the air quality division. And this, over the last several years, has been the most active. There have been a lot of new air quality rules coming from the federal side of things that we then have to implement into our programs. Now, the first one I want to talk about is regional haze, not a new one. It's been around for a while, but regional haze, the first thing we need to understand about that, regional haze is not a health-based program. It's a visibility program to improve visibility in 156 national parks and wilderness areas. The idea is that between now and 2064, we would meet the target values for improvements in visibility for these national parks and wilderness areas. Regional haze, regional haze round one began somewhere around 2011. And the primary focus was to look at the electric generating units and implement best available retrofit technology to those facilities. So the state went through the process. We developed our state implementation plan and how we were going to do that. EPA approved, I think there were 15 facilities. They approved our SIP for 10 facilities and disapproved it for 5. Those 5, if I can remember right, were the Wyodak facility, one of the units at Dave Johnston, and then the 3 units at the Laramie River Station, Basin Electric. We've resolved all of those issues except for Wyodak. We're still having ongoing discussions there. We prevailed in our when EPA did not approve our SIP on the Wyodak facility, they believed that the selective catalytic reduction was the appropriate response. We said, no, we don't. We think that's overkill. We challenged that. We prevailed. It was remanded back to EPA, and so we will be in discussions with EPA to resolve Regional Haze Round 1 at the Wyodak facility. Regional Haze Round 2 originally was due to EPA in 2018. They pushed that back to 2022. We submitted our Regional Haze package. It was disapproved, partially approved and partially disapproved by EPA. And that was the case, I think, with many states. We filed a request for reconsideration that was recently granted by Region 8. And so we will be having discussions with EPA on resolving those areas where they had the disapproval. And we'll either provide additional information or explain to EPA how we got to the conclusion that we did. And then lastly on regional haze, and the idea is that regional haze, there will be updates every 10 years until 2064. So the next update was due 2028. They're having conversations at EPA about pushing that out to 2030. So we're just waiting to hear what the outcome of those discussions will be. Now, like as was mentioned, there was a lot of activity, particularly in the last year, in air quality, in passing a lot of new rules. In 1 year, there were 72 new rules coming from EPA just on air quality. This administration is looking to roll back some of those actions, and so they're termed as deregulatory actions. Not all of them are going to affect Wyoming, but there are some major ones that do impact Wyoming. So the ones that they're looking at for deregulatory action is what's referred to as the Clean Power Plan 2.0. And I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but that one would have significant impact to the electric generating units, the coal-fired electric generating units, and the gas-fired in Wyoming. They are looking at the oil and gas methane rule to see what parts can be rolled back there. Exceptional events to address things like prescribed burns and how those would fit within the exceptional events rules. And then mercury air toxics is another one that is going to be looked at. And so all of those have something to do with fossil fuel energy and providing some relief there. So that's the deregulatory actions. A success story that we like to talk about is the Upper Green River Basin winter ozone. Back in 2012, the Upper Green River Basin was designated as non-attainment for the 2008 ozone standard, and that standard is 75 parts per million. And what the dates are important. This was the 2008 standard that we were designated as non-attainment for. Since that time, we've had the 2015 ozone standard, which now is 70 parts per million. But we still have to do the non-attainment work for the 2008 standard, even though today we're achieving the 2015, which is more strict, we're achieving that. So in 2016, EPA determined that we were attaining the standard for the 2008 standard. Now we have to go through a process to redesignate it as attainment. And this is a very inefficient process in my mind. I still struggle with this one, but even though we're meeting the 2015 standard, we're going to have to expend resources to show that we're achieving the 2008 standard, which is less stringent than the 2015. So anyway, I just bring this up. It's the good thing is we had a really collaborative process with industry, the citizens, environmental groups, other state and federal agencies to achieve the reductions in ozone in the Upper Green River Basin. And it was a collective effort that made it a success. Now it's just getting out of the system is the challenge. The ozone 2015 standard I talked about is now 70 parts per million, and there's another rule that's associated with that, which is called the Good Neighbor Rule. It's also called the Cross-State Air Pollution Rule and some other things. But the Good Neighbor Rule has been a real challenge in that it was determined by EPA that we were contributing more than 1% of the non-attainment in Denver. And therefore, we would have to apply stricter standards to our industries. We disagreed with their determination, as did 22 other states. We pointed out that you couldn't use an East Coast model to make an assessment of what's happening in Western states. There are just too many differences in geography and other things that it didn't make sense. So EPA agreed, reran the model, taking into consideration some of these factors. We came in below the threshold, which was great. EPA at the time had called me and said, "Hey, got good news. You're below the threshold." I said, "That's fine. Now, are you going to approve our state implementation plan?" The answer was no. So we challenged that. We prevailed, and so we are not contributing to the non-attainment in Denver. So that's a good thing. Another good program is the Environmental Audit Program. And this is in our statutes, our state statutes now, 3511, 1105. But, you know, this came about years ago, but none of the industries were using this environmental audit option. And what it is you can do an audit of your facility, identify any non-compliance, and if there's non-compliance, come up with a plan to get back into compliance and then prevent it from happening in the future. The reason industry was hesitant, from our understanding, was that they were concerned that EPA would come in and overfile, even though the state would waive up any compliance action if they went through the environmental audit process, because you get the benefit of it identifying the problems and fixing them. So back in 2018, I worked with the regional administrator at that time was Doug Benevento, and we entered into a memorandum of understanding to show that if we followed the Environmental Quality Act and the provision in the act, that EPA would not overfile. So since we entered into that MOU, we've had a lot of use of that option, and I think there were over 3,500 facilities have taken advantage of that. I think it's 5% of air quality facilities have taken advantage of that. It's a good process, it's worked well, and it's getting a lot of utility, and primarily used in air quality. Now, as far as staffing and recruitment, some of you will remember that back in 2023, we had gone about 2 years with a 26% vacancy rate in the air quality division. And that was causing an increase in backlog and some other problems for industry in getting their permits. So we came up, working with the legislature and the governor's office and the budget office, we came up with a proposal to have what's called we call it a step system. So based on your years of experience, you get a step or a bump in your pay. But we still wouldn't go over the MPP. So that was working within the constraints that we had, but providing a benefit to those as they had more experience, they would fit into a higher bucket. And so we would have, otherwise you had people with 30 years of experience making the same salary as somebody fresh out of college. So that helped create that process to get rid of the compression. Today, so we implemented that in September of 2023. Today, our vacancy rate in air quality is 10%, so much improved. Now, let me tell you a couple of other factors that were at play here. Colorado, and I'm not picking on Colorado, this is just the circumstance that they're in, but Colorado found themselves in a situation where they were non-attainment for a lot of areas, which when you have the non-attainment, then you have to lower some of the standards of what is a Title V facility. And so what ended up happening is that their universe of major emitters grew. So today they have an FTE count just in air quality of about 360 FTE. Now go back to the overview, and we have 80. So what happens with compliance with some of these federal regulations has implications in terms of how big your staffing size needs to be, which is why we push back on things like the Good Neighbor Rule and the suggestion that we're impacting a downwind state. So where we are as an agency right now, we're at about 8% vacancy rate. And I think we should live in the 5 to 8% vacancy rate. Seems normal to me, because you're going to have retirements, you're going to have people that leave for a variety of reasons. So it's never going to be 100% all the time. So 5 to 8%, that's pretty good. And so we're in that spot right now. Most of the vacancies are in air and water, which is where you'd expect them to be. Now, what we've done is we've really worked hard to build an internship program. So we've had, in the last couple of years, about 10 interns throughout the agency, working with the University of Wyoming. The overhead was a real impediment to having the internships, because the overhead was roughly 40% when we started talking. We've worked it out so that we're at about a 5% overhead that we pay to the university for running the internship program. And that made a big difference. So that creates the pipeline to the university. We're also working with the University of Wyoming on a certification program in water quality and air quality. So that's a positive message, positive thing for the agency right now. I think just last week it was, we have 2 new trona mines, in situ trona mines. We have just completed the work with the air quality permitting, so that's moving along. I think the only thing remaining for those 2 trona mines, new trona mines, would be the land quality permits. Anyway, and feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm sure you would anyway. But that's air quality division, and I'll jump to the water quality division. And again, these aren't, this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just some of the things that the highlights of what we're working on. So in the water quality division, one of the big things that we're working on right now is the water quality standards triennial review. As it suggests or states, we have to do this every 3 years under the Clean Water Act. Look at our standards, see if we need to make any changes. We're making some significant changes based on facilitated outreach that we did on the standards for water quality. We had all the stakeholders present. We had the University of Wyoming facilitate the discussion. It was a pretty big rewrite. The standards didn't really change that much, just how they were portrayed in the rule to make it easier for those that have to comply with the rule. That triennial review process has been through our Water Quality Advisory Board and is scheduled for next month with the Environmental Quality Council. So that should be hopefully finalized within the next 3 months. One of the big issues that we're dealing with EPA on right now in water is this thing called Clean Water Act 401 certifications. That's where there's a federal action. We have to certify that that federal action will not impact our water quality standards. When the 401 certification rules were redone a couple of years ago, they incorporated into the rule this concept of lands of exclusive jurisdiction. And Yellowstone National Park was identified as an area of exclusive jurisdiction by EPA, and they were overfiling on our 401 certification, saying that only they can issue a 401 certification in Yellowstone National Park. That has since been expanded into the 402 or the NPDES Surface Water Discharge Program, and we're concerned where this might go and keep expanding. We have challenged their determination that Yellowstone National Park is under the exclusive jurisdiction of EPA. There are the 3 states impacted: Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Wyoming has the largest stake in that. The governors of each of the states sent a letter to EPA objecting to that, and we're currently in litigation over this. We've been implementing the Clean Water Act programs for 50 years in Yellowstone National Park without issue. We think that's nothing has happened that would suggest that we need to do anything different. So we're asking that things be put back to status quo, but ongoing discussions with EPA on that. Lead drinking water line identification and replacement. And keeping in mind, we don't have certain parts, primacy for certain parts of the Safe Drinking Water Act, particularly the sanitary surveys and compliance with water delivery systems, and that we do the construction permitting and some other components, but by and large, we don't do the Safe Drinking Water Act. So because of that, we're the only state in the country that does not have primacy. We work with EPA on implementing some of the rules that are being implemented nationally. One of those was the lead in drinking water rules, which required communities to have an inventory of their lead service or their water service lines that contain lead or could contain lead by October of '24. So we assisted communities. We hired a contractor to help communities meet the deadlines that were established by the federal requirements on lead and copper water lines. And because of that contract assistance and other assistance with communities, we had a 98% compliance rate with the federal requirement, which is, I think, is pretty good. The next step in this process is verifying the unknowns, meaning that we don't know if the water lines have or could have high concentrations of lead. We'll have to go back and take a look at, or the communities will have to go back and take a look and confirm that they either do or do not contain lead. And then coming up with a plan for changing out those lead-containing service lines. Another important program right now is the PFAS, perfluoroalkyl substances, and there's also PFOA and PFAS. Don't ask me the other one. But anyway, this is a big deal across the country. They've established an MCL of 4 parts per trillion, pretty minute concentrations that will have an adverse impact on public health. So we are working with communities, doing testing of community water supplies. We have identified PFAS, every state has identified PFAS contamination in some parts of their state. So nobody's immune to this. And what this is associated is what's called the AFFF firefighting foam. Is one area where you know you're going to find PFAS contamination. Typically airports or military installations are the other common places where we have found PFAS contamination. So we're working with the communities, coming up with a statewide action plan, and then assisting the communities with meeting the federal drinking water requirements.
Mr. Chairman, question.
Question, Senator Northcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't want to go off tangent here, but I think this is an issue important to Laramie County. And just curious about, well, I know it is an issue important to Laramie County. What I have been told by some interested parties is that there really is nothing that can be done meaningfully to deal with PFAS. I mean, it's this contaminant that is impossible to control or to eliminate. And so I'm just curious about that and how you're helping these communities, what can be done.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, Senator, you're right. These chemicals are called forever chemicals because they were designed that way to be forever chemicals, because they go into things like nonstick pans, pajamas for kids, fire retardant, carpet, and other things. So you find it in a lot of places. Their treatment is difficult, but there are options, and typically it's the activated carbon for drinking water sources is one option. Then what do you do with the carbon filters? What do you do with other like biosolids and that kind of thing? So you can incinerate at high temperatures, and then there are organizations like ARIS and ITC. Those are the acronyms, but they're the technology centers that are looking at how you can treat for PFAS and then what are your disposal options? So they're working on that nationally as to what you can do.
No, really?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. Who's paying for all this? I mean, ultimately, this sounds like this is caused from Industry X, whatever. Who is paying for all this?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative, so there's a few different funding sources. One of them is the IIJA, or the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill, has provided funding to states. For Wyoming, it's about $100 million. Well, let me back up. That was for the lead and copper, so I misspoke there. For the PFAS and the emerging contaminants, it's about 7 or 8 million a year for 5 years, so it'll be about 35 million through the infrastructure bill. Other sources of funding have come from litigation with the manufacturers of the PFAS. We have not been part of those, part of that litigation, but some states have. They've taken action because you have the chemical manufacturing company, and you'll see more contamination in some of those states than you do in states like Wyoming, where some East Coast states, because of air deposition of the PFAS, we'll see more of that. Right now, what we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing it at military installations and airports primarily. We are also sampling public water supplies to see if we are detecting it. We went through a process of that several years ago, but that's back when it wasn't an MCL at the time, but it was an advisory level of 70 parts per billion. And we ran through that process, and we may have had some detections, but nothing was over the action level at that time. So we're in the process of going back and taking a look at some of these communities under the new standard now to see if we have an issue.
Since this is so tough to remediate, what is the transportation process? Can we contain it where it is? Is there any way to isolate it from moving to any other sources?
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this. So, Mr. Chairman, Representative, there are many challenges with it. If it gets into a water system and then goes into the drinking water system, the treatment system, or into the wastewater treatment system, it becomes problematic because that limits what you can do with the biosolids. This was a big issue in some eastern states where different kind of transportation, but it's transported from the wastewater treatment facility to the biosolids to the ag community that is applying it to their fields. Yeah. And so, yeah, it can transport pretty readily. And if it gets into a surface water, it has the potential then to be pulled into a drinking water facility, and you would have to pull it out of the drinking water facility before you put it into the main distribution line. So those are some of the challenges nationally, I think, that everybody's facing. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's complicated.
Question from Representative Reagans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question going back to the lead lead pipes drinking water. Seems I recall that households received surveys on that a couple of years ago. I don't know how that progressed. Maybe I missed it. Have you already conducted that part of it, kind of identified someplace where you want to start, or percentage of households or communities with the issue? Have you at least collected enough data to have that part resolved?
Mr. Chairman and Representative, if it's all right with you, I might ask our Water Quality Administrator, who can probably speak more directly to this than, or in depth.
Water quality is not walking quality.
It's a little embarrassing, excuse me. Mr. Chairman, Jennifer Zingmet, Water Quality Administrator. And to answer that question, so as Director Parfit said, the communities completed lead line inventories as of October of last year. And there are communities that did identify lead lines. Basically, I think all communities will identify some lead lines. Excuse me, we had about 525 lead service lines that have been identified so far. And then there's a big universe of unknown lines. And the next step is for communities to dig into those unknown lines and better identify if they are lead requiring replacement. So does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people actually responded at some point or making progress on that. I guess I'll just, one little follow-up. Did you send that to, for example, a facility I work at, built in 1965? I'm sure we have some of that lead pipe. We have signs, you don't drink the water, all over the place. So did that go out to just municipalities, or was that all water users?
It would be all community public water systems that were required to report under that federal requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the next topic is aquifer exemptions. We had several, when we make determinations on aquifer exemptions, we send them down to EPA, and they have to also agree and approve the aquifer exemptions. We had 3 outstanding aquifer exemptions that had gone well beyond the agreed-upon time for review of 45 days before we would have a response from EPA. And we were they were over by about 200 days. And this was becoming problematic for some of our in situ uranium mining operations, because they needed those aquifer exemptions to keep their operations going. And so they were stuck previously down at Region 8. So I just wanted to say kudos to Region 8 EPA. They got those off the plate. We got all 3 of those approved, in short order. So they still meet all the requirements. It's just that EPA was not moving on those, and they just got stuck down at the Denver office. So kudos to EPA for moving those along.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Senator Northcott.
Thank you. Can you just explain further? We heard some public testimony this morning over concerns over aquifer contamination. So what is an aquifer exemption, particularly as it relates to the uranium mining? And are you aware of any aquifer contamination in Wyoming in the last 10 years or so? Or thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Senator, and then if I get this too balled up, I'll look to Jennifer to clean it up. But the idea behind an aquifer exemption is if the aquifer is of a certain quality already, you don't need an aquifer exemption. What you're trying to do with the aquifer exemption, or under the Safe Drinking Water Act, is you're trying to ensure that we don't have an adverse impact on an underground source of drinking water. But there are certain instances where you can, through an aquifer exemption, inject into what would otherwise be a USDW. Now, for the mineral extraction industry, there's a provision in the Safe Drinking Water Act that talks about that. If you would otherwise be a USDW, but the primary purpose is for mineral extraction, then you can get the aquifer exemption that you need in order to produce that mineral. So we follow the process that's laid out in the Safe Drinking Water Act. I'm not aware of any drinking water source that has been impacted as a result of either a class or through this aquifer exemption process or a class 2 or class 6. We don't have any 6s yet, but we're getting there. But I'm not aware of any in the last 10 years, and Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. I'm not aware of any instances where we've had contamination of a drinking water. And as Director Parfit explained, the first step is to determine if an aquifer qualifies as an underground source of drinking water based on the quality and whether or not it's being used or could be used as a domestic drinking water source into the future. And if it's not, we can exempt that either based on quality and the fact that it's not technologically or economically practicable to use it for drinking water, or if there's a demonstration that there's commercially producible minerals, we can exempt it. So we do follow that process. And again, we're not aware of any USDWs that have been impacted.
So on to the next bullet is the Class 6 carbon sequestration program. This is a primacy program that we received in 2020, I believe. And where we are with that is we have issued 9 permits to construct, and an additional 8 are under review. We have 1 request in-house now for to inject. And the way that works is we issue a permit to construct, and we don't issue a separate permit to inject. We just modify the permit to construct to allow the injection. And that's either done through a minor or major amendment, depending on the circumstances. And then we have 1 application that we denied. Actually, it was the first one out of the gate, so we weren't off to a great start, but we denied 1 because it didn't meet the requirements. And then since then, we've had another 17 for construction. So that seems to be moving along pretty well. If there's no questions on that, jump to solid and hazardous waste. You all right? Okay, on the solid and hazardous waste division, just want to talk real quick on this storage tank program. It's been in place since 1991. We've had 1,643 contaminated sites. Since 1991, we've remediated 1,393 of those. We have 250 remaining, and the majority of those are in ongoing corrective action and in operation and maintenance mode. It's a program that will continue on as new releases occur. We add those to the list. On the compliance side of things, we did last year 660 inspections. We had a 95% compliance rate, which is, I believe, the last couple of years, it's been the highest compliance rate in the country. So a good program. We have the cease and transfer landfill program. This is one that you're all very familiar with because every year we have a bill that comes through and we have to update the status of the program and reprioritize sites. We had 52 sites that had indicated interest in participating in the program, or 52 municipalities. Of those 52, 37 have been complete or at least funded. 13 transfer facilities, 23 landfills were closed, and then we had 1 carcass management project that was funded. So that's,
Director, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Parfit, we have seen the cease and transfer landfill program for a number of years, become very familiar with this. My question is, why do we have to go through the legislature to administer this program that you have in place and every year have a bill come through? Why can't that be handled within the purview of your department?
Mr. Chairman, because you said so. We had the same thing with the landfill remediation program, where we were providing an annual update on that, and that was since gone away. But I think when this was developed back in 2014 through the legislature, that I think it originally just wanted to make sure that it was going to be working the way we had intended and be able to reorganize the list as the priorities and the ability of that community to come forward and get the loan through the State Loan and Investment Board to do the work. As far as moving forward, yeah, I think we're at a point now where there's 15 remaining sites. We can certainly do that on our own to get to the end of the process without creating a bill every year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Director, like you said, you've got 10 years under this program since 2014, and you've been doing very well. We've closed a bunch of these, and we've made great progress. But you know, for me and my part, I have great confidence in your department and your department administering this. So, would it take a new bill to make that so that we don't have to deal with that every year and just let you do what you do best?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is, yeah, it would take a new bill to avoid future bills.
Thank you.
So Mr. Chairman, in each annual bill, there is language actually that does say, and this would be true of the 2025 bill, that says that the department may modify the list for various reasons. And then it also includes an annual reporting requirement. That bill is not codified, but as long as that bill remains effective and it's not repealed, you know, the department, I think, would be able to modify that list, and then they would just annually report to the committee on an updated version of that list.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, and that's good news, Brian, thank you. So my understanding of what you just said is we can just sit back and we don't have to pass any additional legislation, and it can go forward the way it is without any additional acts on our part, unless a hiccup happens, and then the department can come to us.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Heiner, that's my initial read of it. I'll do a little more digging and make sure that there isn't something somewhere that doesn't make that the case.
Yes, would you dig into that? That'll be one of your assignments for the committee. We've got to worry about the micromanagement of the legislature. This could be an affront to the micromanagement. Don't you think? No?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, not answering that question. Thank you.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
yeah, what I've learned
Senator
about these dynamics, sometimes between state agencies and the legislature, is we may say it's okay, but they still feel like they have to comply with historical practices or a bill. So I think what I'd like to hear from, we'll let Mr. Fuller go research it more fully and come back with us at the next meeting, because this is an easy lift either way. But to make sure you also feel comfortable with not having an additional bill draft, directing you to not have another bill draft. You know what I'm saying, but it really is your level of comfort too. Because if the state agency doesn't feel comfortable, we just end up in the same place we started from. And so I would just ask both Mr. Fuller and our director to feel fully confident about that direction.
I appreciate that. But I will say the confidence comes with the fact that we've looked at, do we have sufficient funding to get to the end of the process? And we do. And I think that was one of the reasons we were coming back, is we were continually asking for whatever we felt we needed for funding for the next year. I think we've determined, at least for now, that we're in a pretty good spot to be able to fund the remaining projects as they come forward. Okay.
Okay.
So the next one is the landfill remediation program, and this was related. But we had 112 landfills where we tested the groundwater throughout the state, and of those 112, 85 had shown groundwater contamination. So the idea early on in the agency, I think, was that it's too arid here for it to be a problem, and with the types of soils that we have, we weren't going to worry about groundwater. Well, back in the early 2000s, we confirmed that that wasn't the case. We continue to work with the communities for the landfill remediation based on a priority list. The last thing on solid and hazardous waste that I'll mention is on the coal combustion residuals primacy. We submitted our primacy package to manage impoundments and landfills with coal ash in them. We had applied to implement that program in lieu of EPA. So we submitted our application in 2023. They did not respond in what we determined to be the requisite 180 days. So we filed a suit against EPA back in 2023. This has become a priority of the new leadership at EPA to get the primacy out the door. We're working on some final questions with EPA to move that along. So I expect within the next few months, we should have a decision on the primacy for Wyoming to take on the carbon combustion residuals program. And I say that confidently because today Administrator Zeldin was in front of EPW. Senator Lummis asked him the question that if he would commit to making sure that the primacy decision would be done expeditiously, and he said they would do everything humanly possible to do that. So I am confident that'll happen soon.
Senator Northcott.
Thank you. Again, I don't want to take us on a tangent because each one of these topics we could talk about, but you indicated that the testing on the landfill remediation program indicated that there were, I think you said
85.
85 contaminated groundwater samplings found. So what next?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator, what we've been doing is we prioritized the sites based on risk. We took the top 10 sites. We're working on 8 of those right now with the communities. And the way this works is that, and I'm going to try to do this succinctly as possible. Originally, the legislature appropriated $15 million a year for a 3-year period to help jumpstart and get the program implemented. And so the communities would come to and they still do, the communities come to the DEQ and come up with a plan. Either they're going to lead it or we're going to lead the cleanup. On 8 of those priority sites, we are doing active remediation. Putting caps on whatever they decide is the appropriate action there. The state pays for essentially 75% of the cost, so there's skin in the game with the communities. And then we will cover costs for O&M, I believe it's up to 10 years. So we're actively working on those 8 sites. For future funding with what's called the corrective action account, which is what funds the storage tank program with the equivalent of a 1 cent per gallon or fuel tax. We take some of those funds every year out of the corrective action account and can apply those to landfill remediation. So we don't have to keep coming back to the legislature and asking for funds. That bill was passed several years ago. Same thing with orphan sites. We can draw upon that corrective action account. And the administrator and I of the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division each year will look at how much money is available, make sure we meet our obligations in the storage tank program. Whatever is left that isn't going to be spent that year, we apply to the landfill remediation program or orphan sites so they can keep moving along.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Thank you. I just have some additional questions. One is, how much money is anticipated for what we'll need to work through the 85? And knowing how flush with cash our cities, towns, and counties are, what if they're not capable of coming up with the 25%? And 2, is there, and like 3, is there any analysis as to culpability? So why is the state coming into poorly managed landfill sites and fixing it for them? And not that I want the groundwater to continue to contaminate, but is there any process to make them pay for potentially, for poor mismanagement?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator, this is why the program became the program, because small communities, and this is an issue with rural communities, that your tipping fees would have to be so extraordinarily high, you wouldn't be able to have a landfill. And so these small communities don't have the wherewithal to be able to do the cleanups and the 30-year monitoring that would occur afterwards. So we were looking at, could you regionalize landfills, make it more cost effective? And that's what you've seen is why you had the cease and transfer program would give the communities a chance to close their landfill and then go to a regional landfill or through a transfer station. And that's more cost effective for these small communities. So that's kind of what the genesis of the programs were. After 10 years of operation and maintenance, it would be the responsibility of the community to cover those costs.
yes, Senator Rothus.
And as a condition of engaging in the program, you have to adhere to an updated set of standards for operating your landfill, your management system, so that from that point forward, you're economically viable. Previously, they were unaccounted for costs, so the tipping fees would not be adequate to operate the facility. And that was something that when we worked on this in 2013, I think, we built the statute so that the problem would not repeat itself. And I think it's basically worked. Everyone's been able to, through one program or the other, afford to do it, recognizing exactly the problems that you laid out, which is that the smallest communities couldn't possibly do it by themselves. So they had to look for partnerships and work with the state to get it done. But I don't think we've had any community that's still saying, hey, we can't get this done. I think we're working with everybody at this point. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is accurate. And this issue came up because some of the communities under the cease and transfer where they were to meet a 25% obligation were still small enough that they couldn't make that commitment either. And so a revision to the statute was made to allow, under certain circumstances, those small communities, if they can make the financial demonstration, that we would pay 100% of the cease and transfer program.
Representative Knapp, you've got a question.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that some of these go way back in time where liners weren't required, and then we've gone to a transition where they are now, so there's leaching.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Yeah, most of these were, or all of them have been unlined. And then there was a question, I think, about, what was the total price tag? Originally, back in 2012, the original price tag for the 85 sites, and again, these weren't all engineer estimates, but the best guess was about 226 million. For all 85. I don't have a number today of where that is.
We're coming, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we're coming in way under that, though, like inflation adjusted, based on the real engineering estimates, and then trying to work together and combining multiple projects together. It seems like you guys are way outperforming those estimates.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's true for the cease and transfer program. I know I can speak to. We had estimated that was going to be 92 million based on what was submitted to us. We're going to come in around 76 million for the total cost.
Go ahead.
Okay, now jump to slide 7, Land Quality Division. As I mentioned, we have a new Land Quality Division Administrator, Brandy O'Brien. We have the program for land quality is kind of split between coal and non-coal. The one thing I would point out is that there's been a nominee for the Office of Surface Mines, Lanny Erdos. He was in the last year of the first Trump administration, he was the OSM director. He's been nominated again to fill that role. He just hasn't been scheduled yet for his hearing. But anyway, on the coal side, the biggest issue is once they get fully staffed back at OSM, because they're a little thin right now. Our Denver contact, he was the manager of the Denver region. He retired, took the early buyout. The acting director of OSM took the early buyout. Several others did, and so they're reshuffling the deck chairs, so to speak, to keep things moving along. But that means we've got pending program amendments that will be a priority when the new director comes on board. They've been sitting there for a while. I think we have 6 pending program amendments. One of those is the assigned trust that you all, or most of you are familiar with, that legislation was passed 2 or 3 years ago on, but nobody's been able to use it because you have to have the program amendment from OSM approving that. So for coal, they can't use it. Other mining into the trona, bentonite, and uranium can still use the assigned trust, though.
Yes, Senator Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Parfit, I know that there's a lot of cuts at many of these agencies that you engage with, like a 10% staff reduction at many of them. And I'm curious, I know that we have not had necessarily all of our positions filled. We've had some vacancies in water quality, land quality, and I think probably air quality divisions. I'm wondering if you're poaching any of those people, because I know that very, very good people are being terminated that are ultra highly trained, incredible resources. Are you reaching out and grabbing them?
So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, we're aware of that. We're seeing that on our end when you look at the applications that come in and the qualified applicants. Those numbers are growing, and we have a bigger pool to.
Yeah, this seems like it's probably our best pool available right now. So getting those positions filled before they're poached by some other state might be handy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then just on the program amendments, I would say wind turbine blade disposal. That program amendment was approved in February, which was a positive because that was 3 years of waiting for that to move forward and through the system. And now we have a real viable option for the wind operators to take their turbine blades to the coal mines. They can use that for backfill, reduce their bond obligation. I mean, it's a win all the way across the board. So we were happy to see that. And then to Senator Rothfuss's question about, are we looking for some of those folks? It just reminded me that when Brandy O'Brien took the administrator position, her position became open, and indeed, one of those highly qualified folks stepped into that position. So, yeah. I mentioned that in the non-coal mining arena, we had 2 new trona mines that are working through the system. We have the uranium recovery program where we're an agreement state with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That happened in October of 2018. We manage those licenses now, and we do that at about half the cost to the industry of what they were paying the NRC, because it's a 100% fee program. And we're meeting the timelines that are expected there. The thing that we're looking at now is the source material program. And what the source material program would be is another sliver of the NRC agreement state program. For where you are mining for critical minerals, you have the potential to generate enough uranium and thorium to be considered a source material. And that requires a license from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It was requested that we pursue that, the source material program. The legislature had given us 2 positions for that. And standing up the program. So right now it's being funded by general funds. Moving forward, it'll be a fee program, but it'll have to have the backstop of general funds, because if we don't have anybody in the program, we would have to give up the program and then go through this whole process again, which I think we don't want to do. But anyway, we were targeting September 30 for standing up the source material program. It's likely that may get pushed out until the first part of 2026. But it's going to be in that window somewhere, depending on their staffing and their ability to handle that. We have enough, we're funded through the general fund through the end of this biennium, so we should be fine with moving that along. But we will be, we had a conversation with the Joint Appropriations Committee last year. We'll be bringing something forward again this year to do something with the uranium recovery program, similar to what we did with the air quality program. Because if you look at the retention rates, we have replaced every position, not replaced, but we've refilled every position in the uranium recovery program every 2 years. That's the average time frame for a staff person in the uranium recovery program. So we're hoping to move, and industry has actually approached us on this because it's a fee program, it's paid by the industry. They would like us to adopt something similar, so. All right.
Question from Representative Regans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, have you been contacted or DEQ from any mine operators that are actually interested in the blade disposal process?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we were back a few years ago, so I think it's just re-gauging that interest now that we actually have the program amendment in place. They can charge a fee to accept those. If they do charge a fee to accept the blades, the state gets 25% of that fee.
Go ahead, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second question was related to the, this might be better served for the Siting Commission, but do new wind energy applications have to include a solid waste disposal plan in their application process?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes. They are required, wind projects and solar projects under the Industrial Siting Act are required to provide a bond for the disposal, taking down and disposing of the wind turbines or the solar farm.
Thank you.
I noticed you kind of skipped over sand and gravel. That's probably good for this area.
Mr. Chairman, we have no proposed bill. Okay.
Okay,
So
well,
moving to page 8.
Director, you're now 45 minutes over your allotted time, and I'm thinking you've only got 2 slides to go. We might be able to make it an hour past your allotted time.
I will go quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
It's as they say, I was going to take a time management class, but I didn't have time. All right, so then to wrap up with Industrial Siting Division, we had 6 projects that were permitted in 2024. We have 4 scheduled for this year, and I'm sure there are more in the queue that are coming. So wind, solar, Trona, and the nuclear power plant were the big ones. So jurisdiction, those that are subject to industrial siting permitting are the construction cost of $283 million is one way you get into jurisdiction. For wind, it's 20 turbines or more. For solar, it's 30 megawatts or 100 acres of disturbance. And then the last page, just wanted to point out a few other things that are going on within the agency. We have a process, it's called Kaizen Lean Management. This is just basically looking for efficiencies, removing redundancies in the process, and so that we can provide more timely permitting actions. And each of the divisions is working on those efforts. We have electronic permitting now throughout the agency. There are some that, well, we have some divisions that all their permitting is electronic or have the capability to do that, and then some that are just getting started. As far as the public comments, we have an electric comment system. It's called Smart Comment. It allows any member of the public or industry to go to the website and they can review the permit. They can provide their comments electronically, and that seems to be pretty well used. Already talked about the internships. Public records. I bring this up because one of the other committees has brought up some conversation around public records. We receive about 1,000 public records requests a year. We have an electronic system that we use to manage that. Our average time to respond to public records is 10 days. 96% of those, of the records requests are done within 30 days. It's typically the contractors and consultants come in, they're the bulk of the requests. They're doing a phase 1 or phase 2 assessment. The bigger ones are ones related to a permit action that may be appealed or in litigation. So just wanted to point that out. And with that, I'm back on schedule.
Any questions for the director? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Parfit, you have a huge lift with your department, and we appreciate all that you do. From our standpoint as legislators, what do you see on the horizon that we can do to help you with your department? Is there anything that needs to be looked at in depth, or anything that we can do to aid you as you deal with all these things that we've talked about this afternoon?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be in the context of, as we look at the resource needs to implement these programs so that we don't have a backlog or don't become a bottleneck for the permittees. I would say just either as we can identify the need and justify the need for the resources that they're available, and then the salary adjustments over the last 3 years were huge. They really help with retention and morale and other things. But I think those would probably be the biggest things, is making sure that we stay on top of those so that we don't have the vacancies that we saw in air quality. Because that created a backlog with some of our facilities.
If we go for more of this primacy, you darn sure will be needing more people.
Mr. Chairman, that would be true.
Other question, yes, Senator Nethcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that the Corporations Committee is, I think, also doing public records. Yes. Because they need more to do. But I do know that DEQ is a prime target of public records requests, recognizing you get 1,000 per year, and that's a lot. And I think if we looked at the pages that have to be produced, do you have a dedicated software system for it? Do you have a dedicated employee to it as well?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that would be in our admin, that they track to make sure that we're meeting our timelines. And then if we needed extra time, they'll work with the governor's ombudsman and the requester to come up with an agreeable timeframe.
Yeah, so you have your designated custodian who's doing that. Just a question, as the Corporations Committee continues to evaluate this, and I have experience with this as well, of how the Public Records Act can be misused and isn't a tool for transparency to the public, but rather is a litigation tool or a tool against competing businesses to obtain proprietary information about each other. And I just wonder how much of your time in public records request is being used for that purpose as opposed to public transparency. And if so, just to think about and perhaps approach the Corporations Committee, if anyone has the courage to do it, but to think about perhaps appropriate exceptions to the Public Records Act, because the statutory exceptions list is kind of an odd compilation of different things. But I really believe that needs to be more thoughtfully evaluated for what makes sense to be excluded, what doesn't. I mean, the papers don't want anything excluded ever, regardless if it's a disadvantage to a taxpayer or not. But it sometimes just doesn't make sense. And so I would ask you to think about that as we have an interim committee looking at this topic, to see balancing the public's interest right to know, but also balancing, when it's just really predominantly being used as a litigation and or a commercially competitive tool, as opposed to a legitimate need for public transparency to evaluate the appropriateness of it being an exception.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that and be prepared to pass that along.
Anything else? Oh, JR.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With CO2 having been removed from the EPA's hazardous air pollutant list, has that modified any of the DEQ regulatory requirements going forward?
Mr. Chairman, I got to think through this one a bit. Right now, with the Class 6 carbon sequestration as an example, we don't have any requirements other than if somebody wants to get a permit to actually inject, they have to follow a particular process to ensure public health and safety and protection of underground sources of drinking water. If you're talking about the endangerment finding, I don't know that they've gotten that far yet in the process, but that will definitely have impact if EPA is successful in changing the endangerment finding. That will have an impact on all the programs that are tied to that.
That do it? Any other questions? Other questions? Hearing none? Thank you. Oh, you're only an hour over. It wasn't bad. All right, thank you. We'll open it up to public comment on the DEQ. And they scatter, chase them off. There isn't anybody on the Zoom, is there? And there's nobody in the room. So we'll close public comment. And committee directives, do we have any committee directives out of that? What an idea. All right, if we don't, we'll move right on. We'll move right on to our 2 o'clock subject, low carbon energy standards. And the LSO has an overview that I'm assuming you're going to do, Brian.
Yep, so Mr. Chairman, 7-01 in your meeting materials are just the statutes, 3718-101 and 3718-102, concerning the reliable and dispatchable low carbon energy standards. The legislature adopted this article of statute in 2020. Technical changes were made in 2021, and in 2024, this committee sponsored a bill to amend those statutes, and I'll briefly touch on what that bill did. In short, Mr. Chairman, this article of statute requires the Public Service Commission to establish energy portfolio standards that will maximize the use of dispatchable and reliable low-carbon electricity. And the commission is required to do this through rulemaking, and the rules that the Public Service Commission adopts must require a public utility with more than 10,000 Wyoming Electric customers to generate a specified percentage of electricity that is dispatchable and reliable, low-carbon electricity from an existing coal-fired generation unit or an equivalent new coal-fueled generation unit. For purposes of this chapter of statute, low carbon means electricity that is generated using carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology that captures not less than 18,750 metric tons of carbon dioxide during 1 calendar year, and has a capture design capacity of not less than 75% of the baseline carbon dioxide production of the generation unit. The Public Service Commission must establish a date not later than July 1st of 2033 for requiring eligible utilities to comply with these standards. The commission must establish intermediate requirements for moving toward these standards. And then each public utility has to report annually to the commission on its work to move toward these standards, as well as meet certain reliability, showing how they are monitoring and reporting on electric reliability. This chapter includes a rate recovery mechanism that would allow the electric public utility to recover up to 2% of a customer's bill, to recover prudently incurred incremental costs to comply with a low carbon standard. And then every other year, the commission is required to report to this committee and corporations on the implementation of the standards and recommendations for any legislative changes. Mr. Chairman, in 2024, the committee adopted, the legislature enacted a bill that amended the definition of low carbon to what I previously read. The old definition of low carbon was just technology that produces carbon emissions not greater than 650 pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. The 2024 bill also limited compliance with these standards to only those public utilities with at least 10,000 Wyoming Electric customers. It requires generation to be from an existing coal-fired generation unit or an equivalent coal-fueled new unit. It changed the date for compliance with the standards from 2030 to 2033. And then it also included that annual report that is required from each public utility. Mr. Chairman, I can go into more depth. Happy to stop there and answer questions as well.
Any questions for Brian Fuller? Do you have a question, JR? Oh, no? Okay. Okay. You're going to go further or not?
Mr. Chairman, unless you'd like me to, I'm happy to, hold
Okay.
pat there. Thank you.
All right. All right, yeah. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, I understand there's some reporting structure in there, that every other year, some reports. Are we getting those reports? Have you seen some of those reports?
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess a couple things on the report. First off, the way the statute was drafted initially, the reporting requirement says beginning in 2023, and then every second year thereafter. So a report should be due sometime this year. Mr. Chairman, one thing I would note is that this chapter of statute, this is 3718-102E specifically, doesn't specify a date by which the report must be submitted. So I would leave it to the commission to describe further how they're interpreting that.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have not received any reports to date. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I would need to double check on that if one was sent in 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the statute? Other questions on the statute? Hearing none, we'll move right on to hearing from the PSC. Or the Public Service Commission.
And Mr. Chairman, just to answer that question before they begin, and I can forward this to the committee, they did send a report in 2023.
Good.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members
Pull
of
that
the
a little
committee.
closer, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Robinson. I'm the chairman of the Wyoming Public Service Commission. With me is our chief counsel, John Burbridge. Before I have some brief comments, I was going to have Mr. Burbridge give you an update on the annual report.
Chairman Anderson, this is John Burbridge, Chief Counsel. Yes, in fact, we did file a report with the legislature in 2023. That statute was amended to make the reporting due to the joint corporations and joint minerals committees. We are currently drafting that. We are aware that that report is due during the interim session and expect that we will have a finalized report filed sometime in June.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just some brief comments. The committee members will remember in 2019, Rocky Mountain Power filed its integrated resource plan that included closing dates for most of the coal units that it owned within the state by the end of this decade. And the impact of that was a firestorm would be perhaps understating it. But I mention that because that was the impetus for this law, which we refer to as HB 200, just shorthand, because that's what its designation was when it was introduced. Since that law was passed, as mentioned, the commission has worked with the OCA and the utilities and other stakeholders in establishing rules, which we have adopted. And pursuant to those rules, there are two utilities to which the law applies, Rocky Mountain Power and Black Hills. They filed applications to establish their low carbon energy portfolio standards. Those initial applications were aimed at identifying potential technologies and the coal generation units which may be suitable for the carbon capture technology. Since that time, and in subsequent successive applications each year, the companies have narrowed down their the units, the coal units to which they believe carbon capture would be appropriate, and they've also expanded the technologies under consideration. At the time, HB 200, the only successful technology in carbon capture was an amine-based technology. Currently, Rocky Mountain Power is working on an amine-based technology as part of Jim Bridger 3 and 4, units 3 and 4, which is part of the FEED study that I believe was mentioned by the Energy Authority earlier today. They are also working on a novel oxy combustion technology in a pre-feed study for Dave Johnson and Wyodak. The other, Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power, part of Black Hills, currently has an application before us for a carbon capture technology pilot program adjacent to YGen 2. That is also part of a energy matching fund with the Energy Authority. That case was actually filed for us on application on April 24th of this year. So it's a pending matter, and we haven't really, analyzed it yet, but that'll go through our usual process. I did want to mention that there is a 2% cap on a surcharge for the expenses incurred by these utilities in complying with the law. Rocky Mountain Power initially had a 0.3% rate, which is basically 30 cents for every $100 on a customer's bill. Their current surcharge, which went in effect on January 1st of 2025 on an interim basis, is 0.12%, or 12 cents for every $100. Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power had an original surcharge of 0.5%, or 50 cents for every $100. That was zeroed out on January 1st of this year, but their new application is proposing a new surcharge of 1.4%, or $1.40 for every $100.
$1.40?
$1.40. $1.40. The other thing I wanted to highlight about this bill was kind of tucked away inside was the requirement that the commission have these utilities establish standards for reliability and power quality. We went through that process last year, and we have established metrics for measuring reliability and power quality, and both utilities are required to file applications each year showing the compliance with those standards. And both the utilities and our staff will monitor them to make sure that our grid is reliable and that the power quality does not degrade. The other thing I would mention, as far as applications under this law, they are required by June 5th of each year to follow an update with us. We have received Rocky Mountain Power's 2025 update, which was filed back in, I believe, March. We are still waiting for the update from Cheyenne Light and Black Hills. That is kind of an overview of what we've done with the law, and I'm available for any questions.
Questions for public service? Yes, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, some of these other states that receive electricity from Wyoming, and they own some of these power plants, coal-fired power plants. If we were to, if the utility were to install these upgrades, some of them may cost up to $1 billion, I've heard, or several hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. Will these other states participate in that cost, or will that cost be borne by Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's an open question. I would note that subsequent to the passage of this law, and it was in the April 2023 IRP update for Rocky Mountain Power, they have adopted carbon capture as part of their preferred portfolio. It is not yet part of their 5-year action plan, but it is part of looking forward. They do see that as the least cost, least risk resource. If it is adopted pursuant to the IRP, there is a much higher then it becomes probably a system resource where everybody pays. Now, where every state would want to participate in that, I don't know. There's some question about, in particular, I would say Oregon and Washington, whether they would even accept carbon capture on a coal plant. The other states, I can't speak for them, but just I think there'd be a higher probability that they would participate in something like that.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yep, go ahead.
So, thank you, Director. So there's a good chance that our electricity rates will go up considerably because of HB 200. But I guess a good indication to me is right now we're seeing additional rates of 1% to 2% because of the costs of studying this. Are other states also seeing their rates go up by 1% to 2% because of the costs of studying the potential carbon capture? Are they following suit right now? Are they paying for this study? Or are these studies fully borne by the ratepayers of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, the only Wyoming ratepayers are paying right now, yes.
I was thinking that we only paid 16% of the costs of those things because we're sharing with those other states. But you're saying that we're paying 100% of it?
So, Mr. Chairman, when something is a system cost, so we're talking only Rocky Mountain Power here.
Right.
When something is considered a system cost, then yes, it's allocated among the 6 states, and our share's generally been around 16%. At this point, right now, this law is considered a state-specific initiative, and so it's for Wyoming only. So only Wyoming ratepayers are paying it. Other states have similar laws where their ratepayers are only paying. So this isn't like the only thing in the whole system that that just Wyoming is paying for. There are other laws in other states that cause their ratepayers to pay costs that other ratepayers in other states don't have to pay for. But in this case, yes, it's just Wyoming customers.
Senator Cooper has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, would you, in your opinion, say that House Bill 200 has been effective in generating the thought and the process of preserving these coal-fired plants in Wyoming? And secondly, do you think it's ran its course, or do you think there's still a little more work before it's repealed?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, this is strictly my opinion. I don't want to speak for the other 2 commissioners on this point. I think that in general, it has been relatively successful for what it was designed to do, which is identify technologies and move those technologies forward, and the process of studying and reviewing, just make sure that they can identify the technology and implement it. And the reason I think it is successful is because it is doing that, but we've seen efforts, particularly at the federal level, to limit fossil fuel emissions. And I have viewed this bill as kind of a hedge against some of the potential legislation coming out of there to protect our coal plants. Fortunately, we haven't had to take that final step to actually implement anything yet, because I don't think the technology is really there yet. And it would be, as noted, extremely expensive. But my hope is that if it is ever necessary, that we'd be in a position where we could rapidly get there. That's kind of how I view it.
Senator Rothfuss?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was just going to note that, I think it's important to take a look at how House Bill 200 is structured. And I was concerned with it, and I opposed it when it started, but I think the amendments that we put in place do significantly cap the amount that could be passed on to ratepayers. I mean, it's basically a 2% max, and there was some confusing language. We went back and corrected that language so that we can't have our utilities come forward with a solution that leads to greater than a 2% rate. So realistically, and based on that testimony, we probably won't see any solutions coming forward under House Bill 200 unless some interesting little miracle happens. The retrofit option that was just discussed is incredibly expensive. And when you don't necessarily have 50 years to amortize the cost of that, because we're shutting down the reactor before 50 years, it becomes challenging. But one of the things that it does avail us of is the possibility, if we're building new reactors at some point, of taking this into consideration and trying to target it on a new reactor build. I know that that's not something that you're probably hearing a lot about right now. We've got the nuclear reactor being built, but other than that, we're probably not looking at it. But do we have any discussions of kind of that long-term vision of complying with it on a new reactor build, or is that just something that we're not really hearing a lot about through the PSC at this time? I don't know of anybody talking about a new reactor in Wyoming other than TerraPower.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I have not heard any of that discussion. Mr. Chairman, if I just could add, when you're talking about the full cost of implementing carbon capture, $500 million up to $1 billion, what that is talking about is the utility doing it by itself. There is another path, and this is a path Rocky Mountain Power is exploring, is to partner with third party, perhaps using the carbon capture for enhanced oil recovery, other things. Those hold out the possibility of significantly lowering the cost to ratepayers.
Representative Knapp, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It just reminds me of the expression, look what we've done to ourselves. To me, it comes down to a question of reality versus ideology. And you mentioned hedging our bets, but I've seen rate increases from spot market purchasing of power, which was, again, reliability issues. Infrastructure, we've seen rate increases, and we'll continue to see that, I think, for infrastructure on wind and solar. And now we have something we've implemented on ourselves to hedge the bet of what we say is market-driven, but really is probably ideology. So we pay for plans, which can actually run up in the millions of dollars, to do a pilot project, which might look at tens of millions of dollars, to a completion project, which would be, as you mentioned, up to $1 billion. I don't think that's reality. So my question is, as we continue to see these rate increases, even at 2% or $1.14 or whatever it might be, I have a concern that we're continuing to implement something that does nothing but increase the rates of our ratepayers, number one, and drives up the price of coal-fired power, which then does lead to alternatives such as nuclear or wind and solar. Do you just have a comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, upward rate pressures is a serious issue right now. Absolutely. There are a lot of different causes. And as you say, this is kind of one that's self-inflicted. But I guess from my perspective, the decision whether to continue down this road with this type of technology and stuff is a policy call, and that's for the legislature.
Oh, yes.
And in talking about partnerships, do you think that if that's feasible with partnerships with power companies and maybe vendors of CO2, wouldn't that be market-driven versus having this bill force that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I would let Rocky Mountain Power speak to their partnership, but the way I understand it, I believe that is more of a market-driven partnership than one imposed by us.
Senator Northcott.
Thank you. Just a question. In referring to House Bill 200 and as amended, if that weren't currently in effect today as amended throughout the years, what would be the difference or the impact on ratepayers today?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I guess I want to clarify that. Do you mean having carbon capture built today, or?
The bill itself. So I've heard testimony. I'm trying to just get my arms around what the solution is, why there's been a failure for 5 years to fix it in any committee or last year. And the fault of that, the self-inflicted injury, is House Bill 200. And if I'm not understanding the testimony correctly, or the dialogue, or the communication, help me understand what that is. What are we self-inflicting to ourselves that should be solved, is another way to present the problem.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I'm not sure I'll be able to answer that. I guess the question, self-inflicted might not have been the best term, but, by adopting this law, we've imposed costs on our customers. And it is for a technology that admittedly is not mature.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can follow up,
Yes.
what exactly are those costs today? Because I hear competing information, and so the opposite view from my colleague here to my right would indicate that the bill has no impact right now. Whether it's a good idea, a bad idea, or could potentially have impacts on ratepayers, the way that it's been amended has no actual impact. So I'm just trying to get to the truth of that, because I don't know. And then where I'm ultimately trying to go is, how do we fix it? Right? If there is no harm, as my colleague who's been on this committee for 16 years indicates, but as I'm hearing from the PSC, there is direct harm, and it's okay to refer to it as self-inflicted if in fact House Bill 200 was an epic disaster and we are causing harm to the people of Wyoming. We need to fix it immediately. And so that's what I'm driving at here. Can I understand what the harm actually is? Why is there a dispute about that harm? And how do we want to fix it?
Senator, so what I can tell you is how much money the utilities have collected for their incurred expenses. Rocky Mountain Power has collected approximately $3.9 million, and it's currently incurred expenses of $556,000. This is what drove them to reduce their assessment at the beginning of this year. Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power has collected approximately $883,000 as of March of this year, and incurred expenses of approximately $936,000. They currently have a surcharge of 0%. Counts almost balance out, but their new application would impose a surcharge of 1.4%. And that is driven by their proposed test pilot project. So those are the actual costs that have been incurred by Wyoming customers at this time.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Director, thank you for this conversation. And you've mentioned a couple of times that it's a technology that hasn't matured at this point, and we're trying to drive this through pilot programs. And it's where it's going to end up. I don't think anybody in this room can definitively know. We do know that this legislation, HB 200, has a time frame. That by 2033, they will have low carbon dispatchable energy. that's kind of a looming out there that, could put significant pressure on our electricity rates. And it obviously is putting significant pressure on our utilities as that deadline is out there. But what I would like to put out there is maybe because this is an additional expense on our coal-fired power plant, this is having unintended consequences, that it is driving our power plants to be converted from coal to natural gas. Completely opposite what this was intended to do. We were trying to extend the life of coal, and we may be shortening it because we put this HB 200 out there, and we're forcing our utilities into the corner. Is that a good assumption on my part, that we may be actually driving coal away from power, we're hurting coal rather than helping it with this HB 200?
Chairman, Representative, I guess there's a possibility, but I think my view would be that the conversion of coal to natural gas is more being driven by federal policy than any policy of the state of Wyoming. It's a phenomenon that's not limited to the state of Wyoming. Conversion is, something that's happened across the country. And I think that's largely driven by the policies of the EPA.
You done? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. On the last point, I guess I'm struggling to understand how House Bill 200 would trigger a shift between a coal-fired power plant and a requirement that a natural gas power plant be built or anything else. I mean, it wasn't structured, honestly, in a way that was looking at a net reduction in CO2 in that manner, where you're going to get less CO2 per BTU. That doesn't, my recollection of House Bill 200 is that's not in there. What's in there is looking at a carbon capture component for the reduction. Am I misremembering that? I was just trying to pull up House Bill 200, but I didn't think it had that effect. It seemed like it was honestly trying to, and again, I didn't support House Bill 200 because I didn't think we'd come up with a retrofit solution that would ever be economically viable. But still, that's my recollection, is that it was targeting a retrofit of coal-fired power plants, that was what the bill effectively did, which, again, I don't think you can ever do for less than 2% increase in the cost. But am I misremembering it, or is that how you interpret it as well?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, no, HB 200 only applies to facilities. It only applies to coal-fired generation facilities.
Yeah.
Not natural gas facilities.
And Mr. Chairman, you couldn't meet the requests, the targets of House Bill 200 by building any amount of additional natural gas produced power. That is not contemplated based on my recollection, is it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, no, it's not. I think the argument runs along the lines of, if we replace all the coal generation with natural gas, then we don't have to comply with anything. It doesn't apply to us anymore. I think that's the argument.
Well, one more question on that. I don't, I've never understood why the utilities, just from an economic standpoint, the way their rates are structured, they get a return on investment, guaranteed return on investment effectively, although there are some exceptions, based on, to a large degree, the amount of money they spend. But they have to justify that expenditure in the rate base. So candidly, as long as they can convince you on behalf of us that whatever expense they're doing is okay, they're going to make more money off of that. So I don't see why a utility would ever be motivated to not engage in this. If they could come up with a justification to strap on a $500 million boondoggle onto the side of their system, and you all would support that as being a good idea, that's a good idea for them, isn't it? That's better than building a new natural gas facility, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, it is. I just want to clarify, they earn a rate of return on capital investment only, not general expenses.
Correct. With a $500 million facility, it would at that point be a capital investment though, because if it was justified, it would have to come back through the ratepayers. So that's all to say that as I see it, House Bill 200, if anything, would incentivize, if a utility could figure out how to build that $500 million system and convince us it was a good idea, they would love to keep coal. They would love to do that. They would make more money. All the economics say do that. It's just that they can't realistically work out the numbers within a 2% to say that's a good idea. Is that a fair assessment?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, the 2%, and I would suspect also if you're talking just about the customer base of the state of Wyoming.
Correct. Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I do think that's important. We, the people of the state of Wyoming, would have to pay for the entirety of any facility, even though we're 16% of it. So all 500 million, all billion, whatever is being retrofit on, would always have to be paid for entirely by the ratepayers. And that was the purpose of the legislation last year or the year before. I've lost track of time, because it would have been something like 7,000 ratepayers paying for the entirety of a facility which could never be realized, and so we at least increased the number. Is my recollection correct on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, that's the Black Hills small portion up by Newcastle.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Thank you.
We want to remember that natural gas also has CO2. They're not clean as far as that goes. They are cleaner, but they're not clean. Did you have a question on there, Representative Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, with these green, carbon-friendly energy, how is, I've had several people who work at power facilities come to me and say, how do we account for the carbon capture and all that when there is no constant velocity with these green, a lot of these, the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So as a result, these coal-fired power plants are being revved up. As a general, if a coal-fired power plant, from the way I understand this, had its own way, it would sit there and run at 6,000 RPMs constantly. But because of the influx of these green energies, now they're idling it down, revving it up, idling it down, revving it up. And I'm to understand that that is outside the normal operation that it was intended for, to where that increased cost. How does that factor into this?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, so the coal plants are generally being used to follow wind and solar. So they ramp up and down, and they were not designed to be operated like that. So yes, it increases costs, it increases wear and tear on the coal plant. Yes, Mr. Chairman, yes, Representative. As it plays into this, it creates technical challenges with carbon capture, which requires you to run at a higher rate, more or less constantly. So yes, it is part of the technical challenge of using carbon capture on a coal plant.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is like getting tricky with how the system works, but so the carbon capture requirement helps to alleviate the hardship on the plant of going from green energy to coal. Is that right? Because it requires the plant to stay at that higher volume of production?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, theoretically, yes. Part of the problem, so since they're using coal plants to follow wind and solar and basically going like this, well, then if you need to run it at a higher level to do carbon capture, where's that excess energy going? It's part of the technical challenges associated with this.
Yes, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for being here. Mr. Chairman. So, okay, let's say we kind of come to an agreement that House Bill 200 isn't successful, but you still have other states implementing their policies that are negatively impacting Wyoming. So we can't just look at this from a market standpoint as a state and say, coal's great, let's march on forward. We have to push back with policy. So what policy do we implement? Because I see everyone throwing stones at House Bill 200, but it was really an effort to try to save coal and put more coal on the market. So I'm not getting that connection there. Thanks.
You want to try to answer that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm not sure I can answer that. I think you're right. You know, there are no easy answers right now.
You stumped the presenter, JT. Yeah, yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Heiner.
Let me revisit this 2% surcharge for just a moment, Director. As I understand it, that is a surcharge that the utility has a mechanism to charge up to 2% for the costs of engineering and studying carbon capture, but not actually, if they implement it and it costs 500 million plus, then you go through the regular rate recovery mechanism for that additional. And so the 2% is just for the studies right now. But if they actually implement and build this big facility onto the existing coal-fired power plant, you could have $1 billion rate mechanism that will go back to the rate to the customers to pay for that cost, because capital costs are reimbursable, right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes.
So we're not done. We're just the 2% is not a cap.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, right now, you could say it's a cap. But like you said, if we come to the point where we're actually going to construct carbon capture and stuff, then at that point, no.
Senator Rothfuss.
And Mr. Chairman, I thought 3 years ago, actually, we changed that language so that it became the cap. And I was just trying to pull that up and haven't yet. But I think we did make it a hard cap. I think it started off not as a cap in House Bill 200. And I think we had legislation come to the Minerals Committee that changed it so that you couldn't go outside the statutory authority of a 2%, which basically meant that unless you can make it net cost effective, you couldn't do it. So I'm going to try and pull that bill up. Look to Mr. Fuller if it would be the second bill. So the first amendment bill we did to House Bill 200, we changed the language around the 2%. And did that not make it a hard cap?
Mr. Fuller, do you have an opinion on that?
So Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, the statutes that you have in front of you, I think cover this language, and it's on the bottom of the third page going on to the fourth. It's 3718-102C3. And the first part of that paragraph begins with the commission authorizing the public utility to implement a rate recovery mechanism not to exceed 2% for the recovery of the prudently incurred incremental costs to comply with the standard. And then later on in that paragraph, it says, to the extent the rate recovery mechanism is insufficient to compensate the public utility for its prudently incurred incremental costs to comply with the standard, the commission shall take such actions as necessary to ensure the public utility is able to recover its prudently incurred incremental costs, and customers are not charged for those incremental costs other than through the rate recovery mechanism specified in the subsection. So Mr. Chairman, and then the last sentence, which was added last year, says no rate recovery allowed after the public utility has been authorized by the commission to collect these costs through the utility's base rates or another recovery mechanism approved by the commission. Mr. Chairman, to me, that sounds like there's alternate avenues to collect those prudently incurred incremental costs if the 2% surcharge is insufficient.
Thank you.
Yes. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we're recovering all these costs, I think we need to take a holistic look at this, because like we just discussed earlier today with House Bill 11, we just passed a rule giving these people all kinds of exemptions on new construction to where it's like we're giving them a break and then we're turning around and paying again. Does that make sense? I don't know how you compensate for that.
Okay. Yes. Representative Knapp.
Yeah, I think this will never become a reality. And my question to you too is, beyond the construction costs of any technology that might come to fruition, then you've got the loss of load in operating that facility as well, which comes off the power plant itself. Is that not correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, it is.
No further questions for the PSC? We grilled them enough, I guess. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us today. Next, I think it's Pacific Power, Rocky Mountain Power, excuse me, gets to talk to us about their low carbon energy standards.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'm Craig Eller with Rocky Mountain Power. I'm our Senior Vice President of Resource Strategy and Development.
Okay.
So I have some remarks just giving an update on our developments on the low carbon energy standards, and then can answer any questions. But Rocky Mountain Power filed its update on our progress with the Wyoming Public Service Commission, March 31st of 2025. Our report provides updates on many aspects of Rocky Mountain Power's review of carbon capture technologies.
Mr. Chairman?
It was too quiet.
Can I ask him to get a little closer to the mic?
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
thanks.
Got a question?
Did you hear me, or should I go back?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Just get closer.
All right. How's this?
That's better.
Better? Okay. Sorry about that. So Rocky Mountain Power filed an update with the Wyoming Public Service Commission on our progress with the low carbon energy standards, March 31st of this year. The report provides updates on many aspects of Rocky Mountain Power's review of carbon capture technologies and associated market conditions. Our updated plan continues to focus on two specific projects being evaluated for carbon capture at our existing facilities. The first is our front-end engineering and design, or FEED, study for an amine-based carbon capture retrofit on Jim Bridger Units 3 and 4. The full study is anticipated to be completed by mid-2027, but the project will progress in 3 phases. The first phase of this project will be completed in the fall of this year, providing the project scope, an initial design package, a plus or minus 35% cost estimate on the capture facility, and a plus or minus 50% estimate of transportation and storage facility costs. Then phase 2 will advance the work from phase 1 and evaluate up to 3 potential technology providers. And then finally, phase 3 will select one of these providers and result in a detailed engineering review and design with a plus or minus 15% cost estimate for the project. The second project that we are pursuing is one funded by our project partners, SK and 8 Rivers, to conduct a pre-FEED study for a new alum fed vent cycle, or AFC unit. SK and 8 Rivers completed a feasibility study of the project last year, which identified our Dave Johnston facility as the project location for their potential new build facility. The pre-feed study activities commenced at the end of last year and are expected to be done at the end of this year. Both of these efforts have been aided with the receipt of grant funding from the Wyoming Energy Authority. In 2004, we submitted a project proposal to the WEA for the Jim Bridger feed study to lower the cost to our customers and maintain rate stability. We were successful in obtaining a matching grant, so a 50-50 sharing of $6.3 million in matching funds, and we executed an agreement with the WEA in February of this year. SK and 8 Rivers also received a sharing grant in March of this year in the amount of $1.5 million. Through these grants and our project partner's support of the AFC project, we were able to file requesting to lower our surcharge by approximately 60%, from a 0.3% charge to a 0.12% charge, again, out of that 2% cap on potential surcharges. And the costs of the AFC pre-feed study, again, are being 100% borne by SK and 8 Rivers with their receipt of the WEA grant as well. So it's kind of my prepared remarks, and I'm free to answer any questions. So,
Questions? Representative Knapp.
I missed that. So one grant was for 1.5 million, and what was the WEA grant?
The SK and 8 Rivers got a grant for 1.5 million, and then we received a grant for 6.3 million.
Thank you.
Other questions? Other questions? Other questions? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, Rocky Mountain Power has been very prudent in trying to provide reliable, dispatchable, low-cost power for many, many years. And you try to do the right thing for not only what makes sense, but also what looks good. Politically, being able to have the optics with the public that you're trying to do the best thing for the environment, for low-cost electricity, and all these things. So with this state legislation that we have, trying to force you into putting carbon capture, if it was economically viable and made common sense and generated a profit and furthered your core values of reliable, dispatchable power, wouldn't you do it all on your own without us forcing you to do this?
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, I think, one, it's just important to note that as a public utility, we are subject to all of the different federal and state policy objectives. And this is one of those things. I think through our efforts to comply with HB 200, we've found that there could be promise with some of these technologies in conjunction with the 45Q tax credit benefits and things like that. But that in many cases, especially for the retrofit technologies, the market is not ready to just have a deployable answer. So we've gone out for RFPs trying to find those shovel-ready solutions, and we've continually gotten the feedback of this needs more engineering and design work, and that's where we're using this program to be able to do that. Again, in effort to support Wyoming's policy goals on, continued operation of the coal facilities in light of, other wins in the federal and across the country level, so.
Follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with that being said, if we were to repeal this law in its entirety, would you continue on the path that you're on right now, or would you change directions or do anything differently?
Yeah, so I think, Mr. Chairman, I think if it were repealed tomorrow, partnerships like our efforts with SK and 8 Rivers, if they were willing to continue funding their R&D, we would look to continue to advance that. Our efforts on kind of taking it on ourselves to do that at Jim Bridger 3 and 4 would likely be significantly imperiled, and we'd be looking for other partners to try to take on those costs, and previous efforts to identify those have been unsuccessful. So I think things like the feed study at Jim Bridger 3 and 4 would likely, not be able to proceed in that environment.
So, Mr. Chairman, what I'm hearing is this is being driven more by politics than by good sense.
We don't have to answer that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
You have a question down there.
Mr. Chairman, can we go back in time, like maybe 5-6 years ago? Can you remind me of Rocky Mountain Power's plan to shut down the power plants, the coal-producing power plants? Can you walk me through that history potentially? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So I think it was brought up earlier today that there were prior iterations of our integrated resource plan. So this is every other year we do a 20-year forecast of what we expect to be the lowest cost, least risk resources over that time horizon. And it's an extended, open to public comment process that tries to find the best assumptions for those future costs. And it's obviously going to be, subject to changes at the federal policy level. So as we've seen changes in federal policies, things like the ozone transport rule, the good kind of was referred to, I think, in some DEQ testimony earlier today, as the good neighbor rule, as some of those requirements have been relaxed or pushed back, those become options again in that long-term plan. There's less compliance around the long-term operation of those facilities. And we've seen those, projections that the plants are going to close in the near term because of those federal policy requirements. Those lives get pushed back out as some of those, federal policies are no longer applicable.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Sorry.
I'd like to go back in time. So I appreciate where we are now with this administration moving forward, and maybe your interest in keeping those coal-fired power plants going. But that isn't where Rocky Mountain Power was in 2019. Isn't that true?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, the 2019 IRP did call for the coal plants to close.
And how many Wyoming coal-fired power plants were set to be closed in 2019?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know offhand the specific numbers. I
Isn't
think
it
was the
true,
material-
Mr. Chairman, that it would be all of them?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know one way or the other. I know it was the majority. Could it have been all? I would accept that. I started with the company in 2020, so.
Representative Knapp, do you have a different line of questioning?
Yes, I think I'll jump forward to 2025.
Okay.
So if I heard your testimony correctly, what you're saying is in today's market, with today's national policies, Jim Bridger 3 and 4 would definitely be something that you're looking at to continue based on market decisions, not based on policies of the past.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, our current IRP calls for Jim Bridger 3 and 4 to run through the 20-year horizon that we evaluated.
Yes, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you agree that looking at this issue just based off the market, it could be dangerous for Wyoming? Because then we're letting other people in other states somewhat control our destiny.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think my answer to that is, we've seen at the federal level and the state level dramatic swings in energy policy. And as those, swings and changes make their way into these plans, we see dramatic swings in the outcomes on what, under those set of assumptions, is the, lowest cost, least risk. And so there are things that, states can do to try to influence those results that may not result in the least cost, least risk in whatever that environment is, but it can, push the outcome in, one desired way or the other. I mean, we see that on both sides.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up to that question?
Go ahead with follow-up.
I think going back in time, because history is the greatest predictor of the future. So going back to 2019, when Rocky Mountain Power, based on using market analysis, market influences, and state policies, chose to make a plan to shut down all of Wyoming's coal-fired power plants, wasn't that as a result of some states' policy changes concerning energy consumption? Do you recall that? And if so, what states and what were those changes in policies? Just trying to get our arms around how Wyoming's ratepayer price, which is what ultimately we're getting excited about, and the jobs associated with coal-fired power plants in Wyoming are impacted by Rocky Mountain Power, and how Rocky Mountain Power is impacted by federal policy, state policy, and all those things. And to my good representative down the dais here is said, hey, Wyoming, we better, I know we have a good administration right now, but that's not all that factors into this analysis. So can you please identify for me some state policies that happened in about 2019, or let's say 2010 to 2019, that factored into your consideration to shut down all of Wyoming's coal-fired power plants?
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, when there are state-specific policy drivers, and we have a diverse set of state policies, right? I think if you look at our 6 states, we have Washington, Oregon, California, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah. It's very different political environments among those 6 states. But as Chairman Robinson mentioned, things that are driven by state-specific portfolio requirements, whether that's a specific state requiring us to completely remove coal units from their rates or achieve different renewable portfolio standards, the incremental costs associated with those policies get allocated back to those states. So the lens of what is the least cost, least risk, including back in 2019, would have been on a federal policy level and looking at what are the expected costs of the available resources. And not in every instance so just because something is identified as the least expensive way to plan for the next 20 years does not necessarily mean it is less expensive than the current environment. Our system needs change as we see growth, as we see movement in, where our loads are, what those load dynamics are, et cetera. And so we have to make improvements to our system, expand our system. And in doing those things, just because we identify the most efficient way to do that does not mean rates are going to go down in that environment. And there's a lot of other factors at play on rates
Mr. Chairman?
As well. Yes, Senator Nath.
I appreciate the effort not to answer the question, but what I'm really looking for is for you to identify a state policy that impacted your decision to shut down Wyoming's coal-fired power plants. You did just testify that it was primarily federal policy in 2019. So I want to make it clear that you believe, Rocky Mountain Power's position, and you can correct your testimony, that it was under the first Trump administration that federal policy that caused you to shut down all of Wyoming's coal-fired power plants. But my real question to you is, Was there a state-specific policy, because I believe that there was, that's my understanding, that some of those states in the Pacific Northwest passed state legislative policy that impacted your ability to sell power to them? Can you identify some of those states specifically by name and what those policy changes were?
So, Mr. Chairman, again, I am not aware of something stated in the 2019 IRP that said this state policy is driving closure of units. If trying to answer your question, I believe what you're making reference to is that we do have requirements in Washington and Oregon that the capital costs of coal-fired units be removed from their rate base at set dates that I don't know offhand at this point in time. And because of that, we are in the process of reallocating costs across all 6 states to ensure balance on which states are paying for which units, which benefits do they receive from those units, and what are the costs associated with those state-specific policies. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Turver, Representative Turver.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm going to change the tone just a little bit here because let's talk about something that's a little more fun. So just out of curiosity, do you know how many million metric tons coal-fired power plants put out in the USA in 2024?
Nationwide?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know.
So it's 620 million. Do you know how much CO2 was emitted from the forest fires in 2024?
Mr. Chairman, I do not.
19,400 million metric ton just came from the forest fires. And most of these forest fires were coming from the states that are dictating that we put all of these CO2 capture technologies. It's just ironic to me, but that was just a point. My true question is in Jim Bridger 3 and 4, how many million or how many tons do you feel you can pull off of those stacks? Because I just want to do some simple math here, going back to Lon's testimony, to see if there's any way we can make it financially viable for you guys to do this.
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe in our IRP case where we are looking at carbon capture on units 3 and 4, it's between 6 and 8 million tons per year is my recollection that we would capture for both units. And I think that's on a plant basis, not just our ownership share basis, so.
6 to 8 million tons you'd eliminate? Is that what you're saying?
Capture.
Capture, yeah. You'd eliminate from putting in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we would,
sequester or whatever you're going to do with it.
the design would be to capture and sequester at least 90% of the emissions going out the stack today.
Wow.
The CO2 emissions, I should say.
Other questions? Yes, Representative Larson, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So does Rocky Mountain Power then, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, when you're drafting your IRP and coming up with your business plan, do you hold more weight to certain states within the service territory, the 6 states? Do you hold more weight because of their population or their contribution to your annual revenues? Is that how your decisions are made? And so that's why we kind of get swept under the rug on these decisions?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think I would, I would push back on the notion that Wyoming gets swept under the rug. I mean, in the baseline preference is that we look across all 6 states and, there be a common consensus on what least cost, least risk is, and that this not be a contentious decision-making process. Because energy policy has become so contentious and fragmented, in our planning processes, we've added refinements to do planning on a more granular level. And so we in our latest IRP, actually kind of had 3 separate plans within the integrated resource plan where we looked at what do we need to do for Washington to comply with Washington's requirements, Oregon for Oregon's requirements, and then basically the other states were reasonably close enough in energy policy to be able to kind of do that in one fell swoop. And so then the incremental costs of one state's policies versus another, where those things are triggering specific types of resources, our proposal will be that those costs go to those states. So I think, again, to answer your question, we look at what is the most efficient, lowest cost method to meet the changing energy needs of our customers versus the resources we have. And then as additional inputs get put in that are state specific, we try to isolate those decisions and costs and assign those costs back to those states.
Yes, Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know the multi-state protocol is kind of being looked at right now, and there's obviously a little bit of a schism between, the west 3 states versus the eastern 3 states in the multi-state protocol. And you were tasked with trying to effectively remove any coal-fired generation from some of the western states' portfolios. I know that it was discussed a little bit, maybe trying to separate that into 2 separate regions, or even discussion around isolating out a state, removing the state of Wyoming, for example, from the multi-state protocol. Have you done that math in a public way or in a way that this committee could take a look at that? I do know, obviously, that the state of Wyoming benefits from some of the power sources in the Northwest. Hydropower is helpful, but at the same time, I think a lot of the additional recent costs that have gone into the rate base have been to provide access through the grid, which has been accepted in the rate base and part of the proposal, but that isn't necessarily for the purpose of benefiting folks in the state of Wyoming, where we produce roughly twice the power that we consume. It tends to be to provide better reliability to folks out west that are looking for some of the renewable power that's generated in the state of Wyoming. So that's a little bit contentious. But is that something where perhaps we could see the math? We could see what it looked like if Rocky Mountain Power entirely carved out the state of Wyoming on a rate basis. We ended up having the assets in Wyoming largely assigned to the state of Wyoming, and then maybe charging out, or isolate it so Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming are in some subcategory, a 3-state protocol. Is that something that we could all take a look at?
So, Mr. Chairman, those allocations are not my particular area of expertise. I do know at a high level that the company held several years of discussions with stakeholders, interested parties, trying to find a negotiated outcome on a new multi-state protocol. Those efforts were unsuccessful, and so we have terminated kind of those bilateral or multi-party discussions, and will be presenting to that group some proposals on allocations, which I can't say definitively on if those are, when those are filed, when those become public, et cetera. But I know that those discussions are happening later this year.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I think that we'd like to see the math on that, honestly. And if you've all probably done the math on it, I just don't know if we've seen that documents. And maybe the PSC has seen those documents. Maybe we just haven't seen it as a Minerals Committee. But I do think it would be advantageous for us to understand that, we end up, I feel like we've been a little bit of a hostage to the 6-state multi-state protocol for a lot of years. And anytime this committee or the legislature has said, well, couldn't we do it this way? Couldn't we do it that way? The answer would often be, well, let's talk about the multi-state protocol. That precludes you from doing it that way because we've got all these agreements in place that tell us exactly what we can and can't do. And then other states are trying to pass their standard portfolio. And so we get into this situation of frustration where if we had the capacity to be acting a little bit more independently, then we could think through some of these policies more easily as a legislature. So if you could perhaps at our next meeting or a near-term meeting, provide us with any of that math that you have so we can better understand how you're looking at the multi-state protocol. I, for one, would be interested in it, but I think a lot of the members of the committee would also like to understand that better.
Understood.
Other questions? Yes, Stacy. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, where would these other states get their power if you say, we're going to give it to you by whatever means we can make it? So where would Oregon, Washington, where would they get their power if you said, however it hits the grid is however we're going to give it to you? So what would they do?
Mr. Chairman, so our integrated resource plan calls for the western states to, procure, either have us build or have third parties build, and we contract for very large amounts of incremental resources, non-emitting resources, storage resources, et cetera, to meet their energy and capacity needs, midterm and long term. So they would need to replace those assets with new assets.
Follow up?
Yes.
I'm trying to find a way to word this politically correct, but I guess I just don't understand why they don't have a way right now to make that power, but yet they are dictating how you're giving it to them. So why are you letting them push you around in this manner? They have no other choice right now. They have to take the power the way that you are creating it. So we've created this protocol and off of our natural resources in Wyoming and the Wyoming citizens who work hard to generate this power. So I guess that's why we're all a little upset up here, because this power is being generated by Wyoming citizens with Wyoming resources.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I definitely understand the frustration, and I think, again, the answer is if other states are going to transition their energy consumption away from the energy supplied by those the Wyoming coal fleet, Wyoming natural gas units, they will need to replace those with new generation facilities. And that will be a large undertaking. So, that in our integrated resource plan, we lay out what, we expect to be required to do that and show which of those assets are, going to be assigned to those specific states if we go down that path, so.
Mr. Chairman, what can we do to help you stand your ground on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I think, as I said in my earlier comments, at the end of the day, the company is, a recipient of energy policy in all of our environments. That's federal and that's at the state level. I think for us to be able to successfully chart a path forward, like any business, we need to understand what the rules are and we need stability. And so I think, as part of a lot of these kind of separate but parallel efforts, getting clarity on where these costs can be recovered enables us to make the investments to sustain those assets. So whether that's, some Wyoming specific or some collaboration between Wyoming and multiple states, to be able to chart a definitive path forward, we need stability and we need to understand the rules of the road, so.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think one important factor, and I'll ask you about this, maybe I'm missing something here, but it seems to me that it would be in the financial interest of Rocky Mountain Power to shut down assets in Wyoming and rebuild assets in a West Coast state, even if the state of Wyoming wasn't paying for that, and even if the states on the West Coast were willing to. Because again, getting back to how your profit model works, as you build new resources, you get a guaranteed return on investment on that. So given a choice, if I were you, given a choice between keeping things as they are now as one alternative and shutting down everything in Wyoming and rebuilding an identical version of it on the West Coast, I would prefer to do the latter because I could then take an 8% return on all of the new build, where leaving things as they are now would not get a profit. So am I misunderstanding how this would work? Getting to Senator Jones' question about what can we do to help you, it seems to me that there's nothing we could really do, because from the perspective of a profit-motivated corporation, which obviously you are, and there's nothing wrong with that, that's the business model, it is in your interest to tear down the fleet and rebuild the fleet somewhere else. Am I missing something?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do not think it's in our interest to tear down the existing fleet. I mean, for us to get a return on any investment, it has to be used and useful in a prudent capital investment. So if we are, simply abandoning existing assets, then there is a risk of stranded costs from prior investments on those assets. It also isn't a foregone conclusion that any new resources that get constructed would be built and owned by the company. We are required to go through competitive solicitation processes when we select new resources. So the IRP in and of itself is not a definitive be-all, end-all, whatever it says we do. We then do procurement processes to validate whether the cost assumptions in those models was accurate in the current market environment. And then we choose the cheapest resources that we can out of that group, whether it's something that the company owns, whether it's something that the company buys from a third party once they're done building it, or whether that's a, long-term contract for supply with that third party. And when we enter those long-term contracts, we are not, investing capital. And so traditionally, we are not allowed any return on those. We just pass those costs through. So I do not think it's just a blanket statement of the company is incented to tear down its existing assets and build new ones is reflective of, the entirety of the regulatory environment that we operate in.
Mr. Chairman, but as a first approximation, that's accurate. I mean, I'm not missing anything on how you guys make money. That's literally how you make money. And again, I don't think any of us are critical of how you make money. It's just important for us to understand the motivations. And, from my perspective, when I see a 6-state protocol and I see how you would be best positioned to make money, and you have a mandate from another state which says you can't use coal-fired power. We had this conversation earlier when I was talking to another witness. If I were you, I would jump up and down, and I would say, that's great. So now we have a reason to build a new plant. We've got a mandate from West Coast states that we have to build a new facility. That's how we make money. We build a new facility. That's good. And then when you look at your portfolio, I know you don't want to shut other things down. You're not motivated by that. There's nothing that says we should shut stuff down. But if that is an effect of building new facilities, that you end up shutting something down, I don't see how that candidly hurts you from a business standpoint. And again, this isn't, I'm not trying to be hostile or anything. It's just from a straightforward, this is how our business works. This is how we make money. Am I missing something in how you make money? Because that seems like that's how y'all make money.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think it is true that if we demonstrate prudence and get a new capital investment in rates, that provides incremental revenue. But I don't think that is just a matter-of-fact thing. We have to go through a tremendous amount of process to demonstrate that prudence. And at the end of the day, affordability is a paramount concern for us. Our business thrives when our communities thrive. And, if we have rapid increases in rates that harm our communities, that's going to harm us long-term. So affordability is something that we're always taking into consideration when making these decisions as well, so.
I think there's a couple other factors too that would affect that kind of a decision. It's called stockholders and the capital to do all that kind of things. So like you say, there's an awful lot goes into deciding to build new facilities. So I'm not sure that you could just make that switch like that.
Mr.
I think
Chairman,
we've grilled, Bruce.
I just,
Senator Nescott.
There's so many analogies to make to this tortured relationship that Wyoming has with Rocky Mountain Power. It's interesting to me that the bilateral talks failed. And the way that that was testified to, I think, was quite revealing in that you terminated those talks. And I understand that you probably weren't there, but I think that's most informative for this committee for Wyoming in understanding that it was the desire of Rocky Mountain Power to terminate continued talks concerning the challenges that the people of Wyoming are facing. As one of the largest energy producers of the world, Rocky Mountain Power doesn't want to continue to talk at the table. And at some point, we have to receive that message and respond accordingly. Do you want to stay in a relationship with Wyoming? And if so, how would you like to approach that future relationship, knowing that you care about how our communities are thriving?
So, Mr. Chairman, first, the direct question of do we want to continue our relationship with Wyoming? Absolutely. The second, we did not terminate negotiations with the state of Wyoming. It was parties from all 6 states and trying to develop a consensus among those 6 diverse views of how, the cost should be pushed back and forth between the parties. Each of those 6 parties has, motivations in those discussions to protect their own interest and not find a balanced outcome. So our action in that was to go back and assess and propose for approval. This is not something that we can unilaterally implement, but a more balanced outcome than we were seeing from those discussions. Again, it was in no way an abandonment of the state of Wyoming.
Yes, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, how much does it cost to transport the electricity? So I'm assuming, if you're right outside Rock Springs, to get electricity to Rock Springs, it's cheaper to get it there than to get it to Oregon or Washington. Is that correct? Is there a cost in transporting that across several states?
Mr. Chairman, in response to that, so yes, to be able to move power from one location to another, we have to invest in transmission facilities. And then if you're actually transporting it those distances, there's things like transmission losses, et cetera. And then that works, again, in both directions. There are power supplies coming from out of the state that do provide low cost and benefits to our ratepayers and customers in Wyoming. Sorry.
So us being in this compact, we've essentially brought higher rates onto the Wyoming people because we are giving a discount to the people in the other states. So we're paying, you've leveled the playing field, right? It costs this much to get it to Oregon, it costs this much. We've leveled it out by being in this compact.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, I think the way the current multi-state protocol works is the general rule, all generating assets are, the costs of those are shared among the 6 states based on their usage. And so for example, the cost of, the Wyoming coal fleet, only that Wyoming's proportional share of that, something like 15%, give or take, is paid for by Wyoming customers. The rest of those costs are paid for by our customers in other states. And likewise, customers in Wyoming are contributing towards 15% of the cost to our coal assets in Utah or hydro assets in the Northwest. And then energy is shared based, again, on usage. In, the original formulation, all states benefited from that sharing because there's natural differences in when customers in Wyoming need power versus when customers in, say, Oregon need power. Our eastern states have more of a summer peaking demand versus our western states that had more of a winter peaking demand. If those assets can be shared and everyone can agree on using the same assets, there's cost benefits to both parties. As there's division on exactly what types of resources are there, those opportunities for that sharing are diminished. And these are the challenges that we're grappling with today. So I think there's been both, benefits and costs. And if things are going to continue on a divergent path, then we're going to have to find new ways to allocate those costs at the end of the day.
Yeah. Representative Tarver.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I've been doing some napkin math over here, and I'm trying to help you out with your problems you got. So I'm going to use your 6 million a year, and that turns into 16,438 tons per day. And if you sell that at $22 a ton, which EOR projects are purchasing at $22 a ton, that roughly is 361,000 per day that you could revenue off of your CO2 capture technology. So I don't know, if that's something that you guys would even entertain, if it's even something that you would be interested in looking at. But, EOR is going to, North Dakota's interested in it, Wyoming's interested in it, Montana's interested in it. Maybe we should take a totally different approach, and maybe we as legislators should just get out of the way and let free market pick up the ball here, and you guys can make money, EOR can make money, the state can make some tax revenue, and maybe we should just get out of the way, is my thoughts on this. But those are some ideas, and it would be interesting to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that's, factors like that are what influence why we are proceeding with the FEED study, and we think it's important to get to the answer. I think there's been a lot of discussion around the cost of a retrofit carbon capture facility, but there are offsetting potential revenue sources, including EOR, including federal tax credits that, with the information we have today, make it look like, carbon capture could pay for itself and be a least cost resource. There are just too many unknowns to be able to make that investment today without doing further diligence. And that's what we're trying to complete through our FEED study.
Well, you could have Representative Tarver do the math for you.
I'll take the napkin.
Mr. Chairman.
Pretty easy to me.
Second, can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
That's not in I didn't even figure in Q45 tax credits. That's just strictly selling it for $22 a ton. So you figure in the Q45 tax credits, but my point is there's other solutions here. Legislation doesn't have to fix every problem in the world and save the universe. I think there's far more better opportunities out there, and it would be wonderful if, maybe we could look for some of those opportunities and not expect the taxpayers, especially the taxpayers of Wyoming, to be burdened by this. There's other ways of doing this.
Would you agree? Other questions? I think Senator Nethercutt made a good point that why we did HB 200, that at that time in point in time, 2019, looked like you guys were going to shut down coal-fired plants in Wyoming. We were trying to put that, make sure that didn't happen. Now, of course, we're all looking at it differently. There's now EORI that we could use that CO2 for. There's an administration that's more friendly to us. There's all kinds of different things thrown into that decision, not the least of which is the need for more electricity, which nobody's shutting any power plants down now. And some are bringing back, in fact, nuclear plants that have been mothballed for a long time. So all those decisions now are different than they were 2019. And all we're trying to say is we need to do HB 200 to try to hold you off for a while till some of these other market situations change. So I think she made a good point at that. And, oh, yes, Senator Cooper.
Mr. Chairman, 2019 was 6 years ago. 2033 is only 8 years in the future. We don't have much more room, much more time to make these decisions. It's got to be happening now. And we need to see some movement on this. Instead of just sitting here
And I think you're probably going to see that from the industry. They're looking at it, trying to figure out what to do with it. I think we're going to see that. And it's going to be a good outcome for Wyoming on all fronts. All fronts, coal burning, electricity in Wyoming, and CO2 also. So, okay, well, thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Rick, thank you for everything you added to that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Kaysen with Rocky Mountain Power. I have a few comments, but I do not wish to keep you longer than when the sun goes down.
Okay.
Because this is going on. But a couple of things that may be of benefit, if I may. And if I can kind of work backwards from when I was taking notes and everything else. So, for example, Senator Jones and Senator Rothfuss about serving other states and that type of a thing. Again, we've got a great public service commission in this. They work very well with utilities. They are a great, and I don't mean this to be demeaning, but they are a great watchdog. They are protecting the Wyoming customers from any other potential costs that should be borne by those other states. And those other states' commissions are doing the same thing. Okay, so I hope that you have some kind of assurance that our commission is protecting the Wyoming customer and we are not paying anything that we should not be paying, whether it's through an MSP or just a rate case or something of that nature. So again, rest assured, I think we've got a great watchdog in the commission. To Senator Jones' point about why don't we just tell those Northwest states that maybe bye-bye, goes through stuff, there's this thing called a regulatory compact. You perhaps have heard that before. That allows a utility to serve the customers in that area. More than just allows, it's an obligation to serve. And so again, it's just that we just cannot say bye-bye, we don't like your policies. By law, by agreements, there are regulatory responsibilities to serve those customers. But that's something that any utility would look at in what that's going to take place. To Senator Rothfuss's comments, again, related to Senator Jones and the opportunity to earn a return on your investment. And I know he's going to slap me later on, but it's not a guaranteed return. The utility has an offer to earn up to a return on investment, but it's not guaranteed. If a utility, in fact, back to the regulatory compact, exceeds that established rate of return or rate of investment, the Public Service Commission can go ahead and issue an order to come in and prove that, how come you're over-earning, you've exceeded that, and they could also ask for a rate reduction. Doesn't happen very often, but that is, in fact, in place. I enjoyed the Senator Nethercott's, and I know she's going to slap me twice in the hallways as well. But going back in time to the IRP of 2020, there were numerous factors that went into that as far as the possibility of shutting down or announcing of shutting down coal-fired units or retiring them. Again, an IRP is a plan. We've already modified that twice since 2020, and it's always subject to modification as well. And again, to your point, Mr. Chairman, again, as the current IRP, we're to meet the power demand, the needs. That's why some of these are being converted to natural gas. One of those factors also is how old is the plant? How many years can we keep this on the road to continue to have it run efficiently and have it run economically as well? And my last comment is back to Co-Chairman Heiner. Would any utility, would Rocky Mountain Power continue down this path of carbon capture without HB 200? Another important factor there is, in my utility experience, again, back to the Public Service Commission, there has to be a benefit to the customers in a project or a program that we would move forward. And you have to run that by the Public Service Commission to see if there is a benefit to the customers for as well with that program. So thank you for allowing me, and I will now excuse myself and not subject myself to questions, if that's okay. But thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Good show, Rick. Good show. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rocky Mountain Power. And next up is Cheyenne Light, Black Hills Energy, whatever you want to go by today.
I think it's about time for a break, isn't it, Mr. Chairman?
No, we're hot on it.
I'll do my best to try to get us back on schedule here.
That'll be tough to do.
David Bush with Black Hills Energy. The local electric utility in Cheyenne is Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power, so that's why we're on there. So just a quick update. First off, I'd like to thank this committee. I know there's some new members, but as has been mentioned a couple times, House Bill 200 was modified a couple years ago, 2023 interim. We had a lot of discussions about this legislation and the statute and how it could potentially be changed to make it more workable. You all did a lot of good work on that in the 2024 budget session, and Senate File 42 is the result. That legislation pushed back some timelines. It, as was mentioned, for lack of a better term, carved out our Newcastle area, which is served by Black Hills Power. That's our South Dakota utility. So we have electric service in western South Dakota, in Cheyenne, and also in Pueblo, Colorado, which is a separate utility from everything else. So with House Bill 200, the realization for us was if we were to put carbon capture, the amine process on a coal-fired plant that served Black Hills Power customers, those, I think it was roughly 6,000 customers in the Newcastle area would have had to pay for that on their own. So that was part of the reasoning behind that. So we did some good stuff there, and it allowed us a little more time to do more research on exactly what we were going to do with our plan. I think, as was stated earlier, with our filing also March 31st of this year, we have requested a 0% standard from the Public Service Commission, meaning we at this time don't see that it is economically or technologically feasible for us to put on carbon capture on our existing plant. This would impact our Wygen 2 coal plant. It's roughly 100 megawatt plant up at our Gillette Power Station. And there's several factors, the cost being one of them. It's about $500 million to put that technology on. So we have that piece, as well as the, now I lost my train of thought, sorry. $500 million. Thank you. Parasitic load, that's where I was going next. Parasitic load, roughly 35 megawatts. So our 100 megawatt unit now becomes roughly 65 megawatts. Those other 35 megawatts are contracted to go to Cheyenne, so then we would have to replace that 35 megawatts with more energy, probably from the market. So all those reasons, we requested the 0% standard from the Public Service Commission, and they are looking that application over now. And I'm not sure if I've already said too much and got my regulatory team in trouble, but hopefully I didn't say anything wrong there. So we're still looking at other options and other avenues for carbon capture. I think I've testified to the committee before. We weren't really looking at carbon capture until House Bill 200 was passed, and the legislation did make us take a look at that and see what was possible. And as you guys have covered, there has been some changes. Things have moved in the market. There's more of an opportunity for enhanced oil recovery and other technologies like that. And so we are working with some partners at potentially some projects that would not be a bolt-on to a power plant, but would still use our coal. We have the Wyodak mine, which is a coal mine, the one that many of you have probably seen driving on I-90 outside of Gillette. There's a conveyor belt that runs under the interstate from the mine to the power plants. The mine is ours. So it's an economical resource for us, and we'd like to continue to use it. We've got about 50 or 60 years left of mineable reserves there, and we hope to continue to use that asset. To Representative Tarver's question from earlier, when I was speaking about the project, it's called Bright Loop. Again, some of you may have heard this before. It's a coal to hydrogen project that we are working on with a company, an engineering firm called Babcock & Wilcox. They're doing most of the heavy lifting. We're basically the host facility. So it's, I'm not an engineer, I'm a history guy, so I'm gonna butcher this, but basically it's taking coal and it's a pre-combustion process, which is another change that we made to House Bill 200. We don't actually have to burn the coal. We just remove the hydrogen and the oxygen from the coal. Am I doing this right? Oh, sorry. Anyway, we separate those atoms, and then it's a chemical looping process. So it uses coal. We get pure hydrogen and pure CO2 out of this process. The hydrogen we can use for any number of things, fuel for our trucks at the mine, sell it for feedstock for someone else at a power plant or potentially us down the road. And the CO2, same thing. We could sell that for EOR or however that works. So the Bright Loop project at this point is in the study phase, the engineering feeds stage. We do have, and I have to be careful, not we, Babcock & Wilcox has asked the federal government under the Department of Energy for money to build a large-scale pilot project, again, at our facility, and we would basically be the host for that facility, and if they can prove that technology out, it would be something that they believe would be very interesting for other customers down the road. So I think that's primarily my update on where we stand with things. I don't know if there's any particular questions or
That
subjects.
facility that you would be putting into that partnership is Wyodak, I'm assuming.
Yes, that's right, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's right next to our YGen 2 coal unit is where it would go. We also have, with a company called Carbon Geocapture out of Laramie, they have drilled some test wells right next to that facility as well. There's unminable coal seams down there, so the thought is to put the CO2 down into those unminable seams potentially and have some capacity there for storage, and that would be class 2, I believe. That's not the class 6, that's not the deep wells, so.
Questions for Black Hills Energy? Yes. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bush, we extended the deadline from 2030 to 2033 a little while ago, a few years ago, to give additional time because it is a new technology that is emerging. Do you feel like we need to extend that anymore, whereas it's, we've heard this only 8 years away and we're still working on coming up with a solution? Do you think that we need to extend that any past 2033?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Heiner, I don't think so. I've asked our folks that are working on these, our engineers and environmental team in preparation of this hearing, exactly if there was any other changes that needed to be considered under this statute, or if we're comfortable with where it is. And I didn't get an answer back that we needed to extend that timeline. Part of the other piece of this, as has also been mentioned, is the federal government is looming large over all of this. Under the current clean air regulations under 111D, utilities are required to convert to natural gas by 2032, their coal plants to convert to natural gas or add carbon capture. So we're under the gun from the feds, even more so than the state, and trying to come up with a plan. Now, again, friendly administration, we'll see what happens, but at this time, that timeline is hanging over us as well, so.
Senator Cooper, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bush, as I recall, in 23, when we revised our language for low carbon energy, that we had extended that to 2035, and the feds cut that back to 2033 on us. Is that how you recall that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper, you could be right. I don't remember that for sure, but that could be the case.
Follow? No, that's fine. Okay. Yes. Representative Tarver.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Bush, thank you. So I heard power, you said hydrogen would be a byproduct of the Bright Loop project and CO2, and you said something about powering your mine equipment. Were you also going to use that to power the generators, or is this a total separate project and has nothing to do with the bolt-on system? Are you planning on using the hydrogen to make up for the loss of power that we're going to lose out on here, or is this strictly, the Bright Loop is strictly taking the coal, using it for a total different application?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. It would be a totally different application. It would be, the large-scale project would not be any sort of a bolt-on to the power unit itself. It would be a separate facility that would produce the hydrogen and the CO2. And the hydrogen would, as a large-scale test project, it wouldn't be a significant amount to where we could, I think, power anything. Again, I'm not an engineer, but this is what they've been telling me, is from that project, it would mostly be something we could use to potentially put in our haul trucks or maybe market small scale. But the theory being, if this the large scale pilot project works and pencils out, we could potentially, Babcock and Wilcox could build a larger facility there and continue to grow that as an opportunity for coal to be used. Again, there's no emissions because it's not combusted. So it checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people in that arena.
Follow up,
Yes,
Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead.
So how are you planning on replacing your power generation by 2033? Do you have something else? Or I guess, what's your plan here in the future moving forward?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tarver, at this point, we are continuing to operate our plants, and I think that's part of what we're looking at with carbon capture is if there is a technology that's economically feasible, perhaps we could do that, but I don't know that a final plan has been made at this point on what we're going to do with those.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. To Representative Tarver's question, though, that technology, that Bright Loop technology, could be utilized to produce electricity. It's a coal combustion, but it's sort of an indirect combustion technology where you're not using air, you're using an oxide that provides the oxygen for the reaction and isolation. So you end up with, as Mr. Bush said, you end up with hydrogen coming out and pure CO2. From that, nothing says you couldn't burn that hydrogen, and then your combustion product is simply water vent it, and produce electricity. So what's that? Not necessarily. Again, that's one of the things that they'll probably learn more about. I think that's the N=1. That's like the first large-scale Bright Loop prototype, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they figure that out a little bit better as they do it. If you're in a position where you can sell that CO2, as you were asking a few minutes ago, you might be able to put together a pretty darn good business case to do cogeneration CO2 production, and then maybe you sell some of the hydrogen. It all depends on what the market looks like at that point. But, you know. Yeah, absolutely. And the beauty is it's co-located with coal, so you don't have to pay the shipping costs. There's a lot of upside to that project. I'm very excited that Black Hills is working on that in Wyoming and trying to develop that technology out here, because it's exactly what, honestly, I think we should have been doing about 20 years ago, is trying to explore these alternative technologies that keep coal viable in the market. There's no argument against a Bright Loop, for example, right? You have a pure CO2 stream that's not parasitic, and that's a big key, right? As Mr. Bush mentioned, the amine scrubbers plus pressurization end up taking about 35%. You end up with a pure CO2 stream. So depending on how you inject it, you would have to take it up to pressure for reservoir, but you'll lose a little bit for that. But you end up with a pure CO2 stream and the hydrogen stream. So it's exactly what the coal industry should have been focused on 20 years ago. And if we'd had these technologies online 20 years ago, we wouldn't be having these debates at this point in time. We'd just have coal-fired power plants everywhere and no one would be complaining. So it's, we'd still complain. We find something else to complain about. But, this is probably the best thing that came out of House Bill 200 in my mind, is the fact that I think without House Bill 200, we probably wouldn't be having this demonstration plant being built, for Wyoming coal. So I appreciate that.
Other questions? Other questions?
And Mr. Chairman,
Bush?
I should clarify, we aren't building it yet. That's the funding piece, but we do have support from our federal delegation to the Department of Energy, so hopefully something will come out of that. But
No other questions? Thank you, Mr. Bush.
thank you. Glad there was no math.
Thank you for hanging in there with us, even though we're a little behind schedule. We'll open it up for public comment now on low carbon energy standards. Low carbon energy standards. Do we have anybody on Zoom? Nobody on Zoom, nobody in the room. We'll close public comment and we'll go to committee directions. Can you give us a wrap up of what directions we've given you? Which might not be much.
So, Mr. Chairman, when we have committee directives on that generally is actually your directions to us.
Oh, well,
So
we've been giving them all day, Brian.
So, Mr. Chairman, at least on my end, the only action would be I'll consult with Director Parfit on the cease and transfer matter. I think I've got, that distilled to 2 questions to ask on that, but otherwise, no directives of us, at least, that I have marked down.
Okay, all right. Is there any committee directives we'd like to give him? No? Representative Heiner, do you have some directives you'd like to give to the LSO?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
We had quite a discussion about CO2 and enhanced oil recovery and transportation of CO2 transmission, where we're constrained with our transmission. But we heard also that North Dakota, possibly Saskatchewan province in Canada, Montana, they also need additional CO2 up in that country. And so what I would propose is a joint resolution patterned after what Utah put out this last session, and Majority Floor Leader is very aware of that, HCR 9, that they did for a regional energy compact. But what I propose, and this is my motion, is a resolution to encourage establishment of an interstate and international compact for regional CO2 infrastructure between Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, and Canada, Saskatchewan. And this resolution recognizes the shared energy resources and challenges and directs the governor's office through the WEA to initiate discussions and develop a framework for a compact, and also expresses commitment to fostering regional cooperation on CO2 transportation and delivery for enhanced oil recovery. And that's my motion.
Do I hear a second on that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Tarver. Any discussion? Any discussion? It's a resolution, not a bill, a resolution that we would include everybody in our discussions. Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the resolution as proposed by Representative Heiner, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
A draft. Have also draft a resolution. That's what you said, but I just heard something.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Yeah. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That draft motion carries. Can we do a draft for the next meeting?
For the next meeting, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Not tomorrow, but, not tomorrow. But the
Probably
next-
not tomorrow, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, all right, good. Anything else to come before the committee? Any other directives? All right, well, if there is not, we'll close this meeting out. We'll go recess, so we're starting again at 8:30 in the morning here in this same room. We'll call a meeting to order about 8:30. That means some people will get here at 8:29, and some will get here later. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
one observation.
yeah.
I'd like to point out, this is the quietest that Representative Lawley has ever been in one of these meetings, so.
Oh dear, do I need to respond to that? I do apologize for attending remotely, but I did have some knee surgery on Monday. So I'm kind of limited to just being around my house, but I'll be louder tomorrow if needed, if that'll help you out.
You're good. You're good. This meeting is adjourned.